Hello, 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 everyone. We are a little late today. Sorry to everyone who I know that has been desperately waiting for this episode. So, hi out there, everyone in LinkedIn land. We had a couple of technical issues beforehand getting on here because Min is not going to be with me today. It is just me running the technical gamut. So, that's why we're a couple minutes late. So, anywho, welcome to everyone. Say hi in the chat if you are here. Tell me your name, I only really want to know one data point. So name, what your role is, and then I want to know, do you believe, one word only, yes or no, that it is not over? That the documentary tonight is going to be either in episode 9 for Stranger Things, like everyone is predicting. Yes, I believe that it's not over. I believe that there's going to be more footage. I believe that the story isn't over, or no, I believe that it's finished. I don't believe that it's going to keep going. So that's a yes or no question. I only want one word. Yes, I believe that it's going to keep going, or no, I believe that it was finished at episode 8 for Stranger Things. So welcome to everyone who is tuning in today. Sorry, I'm blushing because I'm so excited about today's topic. So we have a very, very spicy topic today. Honestly, a topic that I didn't think that we were going to come to. Certainly at this point or stage in the game, I thought that, hypothetically, that it all ended at episode 8. So we're going to break today up into 6 sections that we're going to do them all very, very rapid fire. So we're going to do the first 2 that we're going to lead off with are going to be sales topics, and then we're going to go Stranger Things, and then we're going to go two sales topics again, then we're going to go Stranger Things. So essentially the first 2 topics that are sales topics are 11 things that AEs aren't saying on discovery calls that they should be. 11 things. Topic 2 is 11 strange things that SDRs strangely aren't saying on their cold calls, but they should be. And then we're going to topic 3, go into Stranger Things. So this is going to be, I'm going to go rapid fire. Don't worry about, essentially the timing. I'm not going to go long on any of these, but I'm going to go rapid fire through 111 plot holes that they left open with the current Stranger Things ending that they have. And I'm saying this out of respect because I do not in any way believe that this is the end. I believe for sure that there is going to be footage tonight in the documentary or something. I think that it's going to be a full-blown episode, episode 9. Essentially, the documentary is 2 hours and 2 minutes, which should be your first clue. Of the first 8 episodes were 10 hours, which is mirrored to Mike saying that the campaign was 10 hours long. And then he asked for 20 more minutes, which the first 8 episodes were 10 hours and 20 minutes. And then the next documentary is 2 hours and 2 minutes long exactly, which would bring to a full 12-hour campaign. So point being, I'm going to go into 111 quick rapid-fire plot holes that they left open with the current season quote-unquote finale. And then we're going to go back to sales. We're going to go 11 things that AE leaders aren't looking at that they should be. 11 things that SDR leaders strangely aren't looking at that they should be. And we're going to finish off with rapid fire 111 things that clues that you probably missed. I'm only going to cover a couple that were seen on the internet. Like, for instance, the yellow sign that was in the background at graduation, or the people that were wearing the glasses that were behind every main character. There's a litany of ones that are online, but I'm going to stay all off the popular ones. And I'm going to dig into ones that you probably missed, and some for sure that I know that aren't online. If you go to any of the Confirmity Gate theories, that I think are for sure dead giveaway clues that there is going to be more footage, and that was not the end. Okay, so why don't we start off with sales stuff? So I'm going to go in here, and I'm just looking at the time so I can give myself a timer. So we're going to start off with sales things, and we're going to start off with the 11 things that AEs aren't asking in discovery calls that I think that they should be. So the first type of question that I think that they should be covering that they currently aren't are called defining questions. So anytime that a prospect gives me a subjective answer, they say I have, low attrition, I have high open rates, I have, a really, really brutal network latency. Anytime they give me a subjective answer, if I'm trying to diagnose on a discovery call, I'm going to need objective data. So the first type of question that they oddly, strangely skip over is a defining question. So if they say, I have, really, really low open rates, for instance, I would say low like 10, low like 15, and they'll usually jump in and fill in the gap. Or I could say something like low meaning what? What is your current open rate, if you don't mind me asking? So that's the first type of question that AE should be asking that I don't see them asking. The second type of question that I don't see them asking are business problem questions. So 9 times out of 10, if I were to ask an AE if they have gotten the business problem on the discovery, they're usually going to say yes, they have. Sorry, I'm trying to show my Stranger Things, give my credit here. 9 times out of 10, they would say that they found the business problem. But when you get down to the nitty gritty, I define a business problem as the amount of lagging indicator achievement delta between their achievement, lagging indicator achievement, and the lagging indicator goal internally. So let's say, for instance, you have a CFO on the line. CFO, their lagging indicator is gross profit margin. To have the business problem, I would need to know the 2 data points of what is their current profit margin and what is their goal of their profit margin internally. So the business problem questions that I don't hear asked are, what are those numbers? So for an IT director, for instance, it would be a lagging indicator of server uptime. So if you don't walk away with at least the server current uptime and the goal internally, then I don't believe that you have a business problem. So that's the second type of question that I don't hear AEs asking. The third one, one that I commonly hear them say, if I say, did you get the business problem? They're like, yeah, I got the business problem. Like, what is it? They're like, they need blank. And I'm like, that's a need. That's a self-prescribed solution, essentially, but it's not a problem. What do they need it to do is the business problem, generally speaking. Okay, the third type of question that they are strangely not asking is a question to find the reasoning behind the current self-diagnosis of the prospect. So our prospects believe something, that's called a self-diagnosis. The reasoning behind what is the fact that supports the belief in the self-diagnosis that they have is a data point that I absolutely need the answer to. So for instance, if they were to say, our open rates are killing us in terms of quota attainment. If I were to simply say, why do you say that? That's going to get me closer to the reasoning that supports why why the open rates is the current thing that is stacking up into their problem behind quota attainment. So the reasoning behind why I need that belief is when I'm going to, quote unquote, blow up a misdiagnosis, something in belief that's not true, I need to understand what's the fact that supports it. So I attack the fact was not true, not their belief or them as a person for believing it. So I don't have time to go into examples, but there's a litany of different reasons behind why I do that. But essentially, it makes them the hero in that situation, because when you blow up the fact that supports it, it takes away their villainization of they're a quote unquote stupid person, or they're someone who believes something that wasn't true. It essentially says this is the culprit behind that belief, and once you correct that fact, then they make draw the correct assumption off of that fact. So that is the third type of question that I don't see AEs asking that I would definitely recommend asking. And it's a simple question of why do you say that, or what makes you say that, is a really helpful one that will help you understand the reasoning behind why they have the self-diagnosis that they have. The fourth type is impact question. I don't mean the nauseating impact question of getting the why behind the why, but an impact question is simply put from a business problem perspective. Because of the business problem that exists, meaning the gap between the lagging indicator achievement and the lagging indicator goal internally, what are the effects that are happening because of that delta? So let's do an example. Let's say that let's say a persona of of an HR leader, for instance, and their lagging indicator is employee retention and job recs filled. So let's take the job recs one, for instance. Let's say the job recs that they have filled is a lagging indicator, meaning the main way that they're metriced is they have to fill 100 and they've only filled 20 at this point. That's the business problem, is they are at 20 currently and the goal internally is 100. So they have an 80 delta, rec delta of people that they haven't filled. The impact of that is, how does that affect the programs internally lateral to the HR team? How does that affect their leaders? And how does that affect them within either their personal life or within them as a persona? So the impact questions that I could ask, instead of asking the question of what, what's the why behind the why, or what are the ripple effects, that you're just going to get a self-diagnosis at that point, not something that they didn't know. Questions that I would be asking to find something that they didn't know at that point is, if someone can't fill 80 job recs as an HR leader, a question that I would want to know is, well, y'all can start to take some guesses in the chat, but something that I would want to know as an HR leader, or as a someone who's selling into them and trying to diagnose a problem that they don't know, is what departments, what's the split of the breakdown of the departments where the open job recs are. If I find that out of those 80 job recs that aren't filled, that 70 of them are on the product team, all of a sudden I can ask the lagging indicators of the product team of how many products are they supposed to release this quarter or this year, and how many they released so far. If that answer is they've only released one and they need to release 20, all of a sudden I found a lateral impact that the person didn't know about. So I hear lots of people saying, what are the ripple effects, or what's the why behind the why, which makes your prospect basically, tune out because they know where you're going. What I don't hear a lot of people asking is asking the impact questions around how their business problem is affecting how the business problem is affecting the lateral teams and how it's affecting their leaders, by asking about the lagging indicators of both. There you can find a lateral impact or a vertical impact that the person didn't know about. So I don't hear that prescriptive type of question being asked by an AE. Okay, the fifth one is lagging indicator questions. We've been pretty deep there, so I'm going to go on to 6. And what I mean by lagging indicators is the main thing that persona is hired and fired to drive. I have to ask a lot of people in training. If it's an AE, I'll say, for your 5 personas, let's say you sell into IT director, CISO, CIO, network security architect, and security engineer. Out of those 5 personas, what are their lagging indicators? Close your eyes, and if you think of their lagging indicator. What are they hired and fired to drive? What's the one metric that they care about most? I would say about 93% of the time, people can't do that. And here's the thing, that's where their entire problem is anchored to. So if I don't even know that is what they're measured on, how do I have any credibility to have the conversation? They shouldn't want to have the conversation with me. So lagging indicators, knowing those about your persona, knowing what the industry average is and the industry average attainment is absolutely paramount within the conversation. So that's number 6. Number 7 is going to be objective questions. So anytime that you're asking a question with a subjective term in there, what I mean by that is adjective or an adverb. Quick, high, low, good, bad. I hear a lot of ineffective processes. I'm like, if you ask someone, do you have ineffective processes? I don't even know how to answer that. So it has to be objective in nature, meaning a question that they can actually answer. Instead of saying, do you have low open rates? Say, do you have, what is your open rate? Or do you have an open rate below 25, for instance? So this hurts you for 2 reasons. The first being, it only gives you a subjective answer of what they believe back. I'm going to say whether I think I have a low open rate back or not, but I am subject to the whims of the person's understanding of what low means at that point, and assuming that means what I mean by the term low. So that's the first downside to it. The second downside is they know exactly where you're going, right? So I think the reason I list that as the second downside is I truly mean it as that. I can't diagnose without subjective actual data points. And the prospect, their first clue that you're not after helping them is if I ask subjective questions. If I ask, do you have a low open rate? And you're like, yes, I know exactly where you're going. Of like, you're looking for me to say yes so that you can sell to me. If you are actually looking to diagnose something I didn't know, then you would have to know an objective data point. So anytime you're asking a question with, we work with teams that struggle with, low open rates, high attrition, any of that, I would say that is a very big sign to you and your prospect that you're asking questions that are not after actually helping them. So that's the 7th type of question that AEs aren't asking is objective questions entirely in nature. The 8th is questions that the prospect they're asking ones that the prospect can answer. They're not asking those. So questions that the prospect can answer is, what is your open rate? Is your open rate below this point? What's your network latency? For a CFO, what's your CAC, for instance? What's your gross profit margin? I can't answer hypothetically, do you have a low gross profit margin? Or what's your low gross profit margin doing to your other teams? I hypothetically don't know. And that's where seller's expertise comes in. So I'd take a step back and ask yourself, can the prospect even answer the question? So medical, whenever people are advertising for medications, they're actually really good about this. They don't ask, do you have this condition that you didn't know about? They're like, do you live in the Des Moines area? You're, younger than 40 years of age currently, and you have 2 siblings or more. If yes, you might be entitled to X, Y, and Z. And the point of that ad is they're trying to tease out people who might have an opportunity that didn't know that they have. But how they do that is by asking extremely objective questions. They can't answer, or they can't answer accurately, do you have this condition that you didn't know about? Like, it's a catch-22. What they can answer is very objective questions. Am I 40 years or older? Do I live in the greater Des Moines, area? If the answer is no, then I'm like, I don't have that condition. So you're asking the questions. You should be asking questions that help, number one, your prospects can objectively answer, and the ones that help you understand that they have a condition that hypothetically they didn't know about. So that is the 8th question, is questions that the prospect can't answer are ones that AEs aren't asking in discovery. They're asking, do you have ineffective processes, and questions like that. Number 9 is questions that find unknowns. So all of my questions, not all of them, but a vast majority should be after finding unknowns. The point of discovery from the prospect's point of view is if they can find out information they didn't know beforehand. So if you're in discovery, and it's wild to me that this is the theory over and over and over and over and over that I see online, is like, my goal as a seller, my job as a seller is to find out what the prospect believes of, like, what's the why behind the why, what's their problem, and how is that going to impact them, so that I can know all of that background. And I'm like, yeah, but why? How does that help the buyer? If I know everything the buyer knows, how does that help the buyer? It doesn't. The buyer doesn't learn anything new by telling you everything that they already know. They just don't, right? The only thing that does to the buyer, hypothetically, most times and in most cases, is it puts them at a disadvantage by telling you everything that they know. If I tell you all the impact that happens to me if I don't buy today, you have license to sell me more products, have more fervence in selling me those products, and also continuously to hold your price point. You're only going to offer a discount if you think that I have the power and might walk away. I won't walk away if I have a huge need, right? So I have disadvantage. Disadvantage. I'm disincentivized to give you everything that I know. But even if I do tell you everything that I know, the whole point of a seller is to find things that the person doesn't know. So if I tell you my problem, or I tell you my need, or what I want, and I hear this from AEs all the time, well, the buyer didn't have a need on the call. I'm like, first of all, they jumped on the call. So there is a need. There's some hypothetical problem they think they might be able to solve, and they might want to solve one day with you. That's why they jumped on the call. So there's some type of hypothetical need, regardless of who the person is. But your whole role is to hypothetically grow that need, right? And you don't grow the need by offering a discount or telling them you're the best. You grow the need by finding something that they didn't know about. So it's like their urgency. They're like, they had no buyer urgency. I'm like, Brendan, you're there to create it, right? Not by creating a problem they didn't have, by finding a problem that they didn't know about. So that is the big whomper, is like, if you come from the point of view that your job as a seller is to find all the things that they believe and that they know about their problem and their impact and map them to your products, why wouldn't they just self-serve? They already know that information, and their preference is to self-serve. Their preference is not to talk to a person. So if your only role is to map what they know to your products, there is no point to you existing as a role, right? They could just do that themselves, and they would prefer to do that. It's faster, it's more cost effective to both sides of the organization, and it increases conversion, not decreases. The only way that it's worth it for them to talk to you is if they find out things that they didn't know. So the big whomper, is question number 9, that's strangely never being asked, or very rarely being asked, is questions that find things that the buyer doesn't know, is the 9th type of question. The 10th is true root cause questions, not asking the buyer what the root cause is, but finding it, diagnosing what are additional root causes that they didn't know about, that they need to think about, or finding a misdiagnosis. They believe that it's something when in all reality it's something else. I talk to a lot of people that want to talk about cold email quality, when in all reality, cold email quality is not what they need to talk about, or not first. What they need to talk about first, in my opinion, and usually when I dig into the data, this yields to be true, is email deliverability and data hygiene. 59% of the emails that cold prospectors are sending actually wind up in the primary inbox. That means 41 out of 100 are being sent straight to spam. It's like, those are being shaved off right off the bat. If you were to pick email quality and deliverability and improve one of those two, you for sure would have more results by focusing on email deliverability first. So as an example of a misdiagnosis or a misdiagnosis that a lot of people have when it comes to prospecting is they're not even thinking about those, or just thinking about subject lines. So true root cause questions should be asking about the state of the indicator of the root cause that that is likely happening to the person, that likely is unknown to them. So you're asking that indicator, and your litmus test should be, do you hope for people to answer in a certain way? If the answer is yes, you're leading them somewhere. It's not a good situation. If the answer is I'm not, another litmus test is when you ask something, if they answer in a certain way, you feel hosed. It means you're trying to lead them somewhere. If you say, "Do you have a problem with blank?" and they say, "No, we don't," you're like, "I'm hosed." If you're trying to diagnose, then you're like, "Do you have it? What's your open rate?" And they're like, "It's 35," and you're like, "It's probably not that. I'm going to go a different angle to find the true root cause." Right? So the litmus test is, are you hoping for them to answer in a certain way? And also, when they answer in a certain way, do you feel like closed off, like you can't quote unquote go anywhere? That means that you're trying to sell them something. You're hoping that they said something they didn't. So now you feel closed off. So that's the 10th type of question. And then the 11th type of question is a tactical problem. The same thing, but to a leaning indicator instead of a leading. I'm not going to go into the technical differences too deeply here, but essentially, the difference between a leading and a leaning indicator is a leading indicator is something you can affect directly, like the amount of emails that you're sending. A leaning indicator is a result of something that you do directly. The open rate, for instance, or the reply rate, for instance. I can't directly affect reply rate and open rate. I can change the email quality to hopefully affect reply rate. I can change the email length to affect the reply rate, but I can't just log into a system and directly affect it. I can't directly affect the how long people stay on my website. I can change the text on my website to hypothetically, that they stay longer, but I can't log into a system and directly change that. So that's one of your clues there. But a tactical problem is attached to a leaning indicator, whereas a root cause is attached to a leading indicator. So questions on both, objective questions to find something they didn't know, I very rarely hear asked on discovery. Strangely enough, I had to tie the theme back in. I went a little too in on sales. And they're ones that are desperately needed if you want to be running an a great discovery. A great discovery is how much information did you find that they didn't know about that would hurt them if they continued in a state of not knowing about it. That, from their perspective, is a great discovery. So we need to mirror and attach our perspective to their perspective. That's when it's a great discovery for us, because it's a great discovery for them. The wonderful news is that it helps improve all of our numbers as well. The bigger the problem that they have, if I find 3 problems they didn't know, the more quote unquote product hypothetically they're gonna buy, and the more they're going to trust me and trust themselves that net if they move forward and make a decision to try to do something about it, then they're actually going to be successful. Okay, so those are the 11 things on the AE side. I'm going to quickly go through these SDR ones, and then we're going to get into spicy plot holes that I am very excited about. Okay, so SDR unknowns. We'll start with the elevator pitch. There are 3 types of things that I don't hear SDRs. We're specifically going to go for cold calls first, that I don't see asked for SDRs on cold calls. So we're going to start with the elevator pitch and do 3 different points around here. But when I hear the elevator pitch, the beginning of a cold call, while it's important, it is not where I see most people, most reps losing the call. It is usually in the elevator pitch and in the questions being asked afterwards. Most people, if you do a relatively decent opener, and a decent opener meaning you include personalization, you give them a way out, you do some type of barter CTA or permission-based opener, that's easy to do. And most people will stay on the line because of that. You're going into adult base, the adult ego state. Where most reps lose them is after they say, yeah, go ahead. And then they give an elevator pitch that has three things, or they ask questions, if any questions at all, that are bereft of three things that are crucial to creating demand and creating desire to jump on a discovery call because of that demand that was created. So the three things that are missing there is an elevator pitch. You have to keep in mind you're going outbound on cold calls, hypothetically. Let's say for a second that you're going outbound, meaning, and I'm going to define outbound for the moment as non-inbound, meaning they're non-hand raiser. I don't mean and this is including webinar registrants, event leads, what I call postbound leads. They downloaded content. I'm going to, for a minute, define all of those as outbound, meaning they're not raising their hands saying that they have a need. In all of these cases, it's signaling to you that they, as is, don't have a problem that's big enough to solve for yet, based on what they know. You have to keep that in mind. You must. Even on cold email as well, you're going to someone who, by definition, does not have a problem that's big enough based on what they know. So you have to find something new that, based on what they knew, they weren't going to do anything about it. But based on what they know now, they're going to do something about it. So the three pieces of the elevator pitch, I'll hear people saying, we work with people who struggle with low close rates or low open rates or, X, Y, and Z. Are you running into any of that? Or are you going to tell me that you have the perfect, SDR team, for instance? And I'm like, well, first of all, it's a trap question. They know that, so they just want to hang up the phone. A lot of times they do, which good on them, in my opinion. But the second thing is, even if they do have all the problems that you just listed out in a subjective manner, low, blah, 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 even if they can't identify with that, the main category that they identify with, because you're calling them on outbound, is someone who hasn't done something about what they know yet. So unless you find something new, even if they do struggle with that, and they give you all the pain and all the details behind that pain and blah, 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 and you try to Sudoku logic, trap them into, well, shouldn't you do something about it now, blah, 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 or what's going to change in the next 6 months? You have to give it, those are just mind tricks that will work maybe in the moment for about 30 seconds. But once they start to go through procurement, or once they start to, attach themselves to internal leaders earlier, the reason that they aren't doing something about it yet, there is some reason that is valid. Either the problem's not big enough, or they don't believe that they can actually fix it if they were to try to do something about it. Neither one of those are alleviated by saying we work with people who struggle with this and them saying I am in that group. So finding things that they don't know, and the first three that I'm going to lead with is the elevator pitch is not attached to objective data points. It's attached to subjective data points. We work with people with low open rates, long sales cycles, low server uptime, low gross profit margin, really high churn, super high network latency. That's the first mistake I see in elevator pitches, is you're giving a subjective term. The second quote unquote sin that I see in elevator pitches is they're not based on unknown ones. They're based on unknown objective data points that the person already knows is a problem or doesn't. You have to keep in mind, if someone already knows it's a problem, hypothetically, if they haven't done something about it, it's for a valid reason. So if I ask you how many words are in your subject line, that's not one that a lot of people think about. Or if I say, do you have DKIM, DMARC, and the SPF set up? They're like, what's that? That's the first key to the prospect, that if they don't know what you're talking about in a question, meaning they don't even know what DKIM is, or they don't know how long their subject line is, that they don't know why that's important. And so if it is important, they wouldn't know about it if it was. So that's a good litmus test that it is something that actually might be valuable that they didn't know about, that is currently hurting them, that they weren't aware of, is if they are like, huh? And you have them for the first couple of questions when you ask about unknowns. If you don't go anywhere with them, then all of a sudden they're like, okay, this person is just asking random questions for reasons that they, for random reasons of why, that I don't know about. But if you ask the question of like, what time of day are you sending your emails, for instance, they're going to answer, if they do know the answer, not knowing why it's important. They're going to be like, so let me look through here. And a lot of times I'll guide them there. I'm like, if you click on reports, you click on X, Y, and Z, and they're like, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. I'm like, huh, interesting. And they're like, why is it so interesting? I'm like, well, industry average is going to show you that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, specifically in the morning, is going to be the most common time that reps are sending and the least effective time by quite a bit to send emails. But Wednesday, Thursday, Friday from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., 5 minutes before the hour and after the hour, the most effective hit times, but usually when reps aren't sending any emails at all. Do you mind clicking on Friday afternoon and seeing how many calls that they sent? So they're going to lean in, but if you don't go to a data point that shows them that you found an unknown, especially early on, like within a discovery call or on a cold call, then they're going to, at first you have them because they're like, why are they asking that? If you show them something of why you are asking that, if it finds an unknown for them, all of a sudden you have more leash, right? They're going to answer questions more readily. So the second type of piece about the elevator pitch that I see reps that aren't doing is keying around unknown metrics. And the third one around the elevator pitch is qualifying elevator pitches. So hear me out. Qualifying whether they have a problem or not based on whether they say yes or no, but by how they answer the question. So I can qualify whether someone has an email deliverability problem by a number of answers. What's their open rate is one. If their open rate is below 50, industry average is 15 to 25. If their open rate is below 50, they have an email deliverability problem, period. Period. So if they answer the question, they're like 30, and they're going to answer with a straight face because they don't know that means that they have a problem. Right. So if they answer, 30, I'm like, yes, they do. If they answer it's 75, I'm like, no, they don't. That's surprising to me. Now I believe it's probably a quality problem. Right. So when they answer 75, I'm not pissed, right? Because I'm not trying to sell them. I'm like, interesting. You're one of the few people that doesn't. And I'm like, but 75 open rate, that means they have no deliverability problem. It means their quality is probably quite low. I'm like, can you show me an example of the email that you're sending or the subject lines that you're sending? And we're going through that, from there. So a qualifying elevator pitch should be qualifying to you that they have a problem, but not to them that they have a problem. So it doesn't matter to me hypothetically. It doesn't matter to me even if they are 6x past quota. I'm happy for them. I'm surprised, but I'm happy for them. What a qualifying elevator pitch should include is 3 different brackets of data points that show you that they don't have a problem that you thought that they likely had, that they likely didn't know about. Right? So if the elevator pitch within the cold call itself is anything to do with subjective data points, high, low, good, bad, ineffective, frustrated, blah, 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 that are subjective in nature, that are not qualifying for you that they have a problem, that are not anchored to unknowns, then I'd say the elevator pitch is a waste of time. Essentially you can get through. And one thing that we're going to get into when it comes to paying attention, what you should pay attention to as an SDR leader, you can get into, if you looked into the data of where reps lose prospects and calls, generally speaking, it is not the opener. They got them on the opener. They're like, they'll tell some type of joke. It's not my style. It's, excuse me. I think when I talk crap, my system is like, don't do that back. It's not my style to make a joke, but that's not where they usually lose them. Where they lose them is that they don't quickly get into an objective data point of like, hey, if you don't mind me asking, what's your open rate? or is your open rate below 50%? And if they answer how they're likely going to answer, again, industry average is 15-25. If they say our open rate's around 22%, why do you ask? I'm like, interesting. They're like, why is that interesting? Like industry average is 15-25, so you're actually right in the middle. But anything below 50% open rate, and you have an email deliverability problem. Do you have DKIM, DMARC, or SPF set up, if you don't mind me asking? And all of a sudden, I've just created an unknown. I've just created value. Right? So if I can do one of those, two of those, heaven forbid three, within 3 minutes with a VP of sales or whoever, gross profit, you're anchoring a gross profit margin for a CFO, you're talking about cost of goods sold or day sales outstanding. If you're talking to an IT director, you're talking about network latency, and you're talking about, backup success rate. If you're like, what's your backup success rate, if you don't mind me asking? They say anything below a 90, I'm like, oop, that's hurting their server uptime. If they're like, it's 93, I'm like, okay, I'm qualifying, right? So that I'm moving on. I'm like, what's your storage availability? Yeah, and the answer that they give me is going to qualify them in or out that they have a problem they didn't know. Anytime that they hit a problem that they didn't know about and they tell me with a straight face on that cold, like a straight sounding tone on that cold call, I say the word interesting, and they're like, why is that interesting? And then I get to share the data point of why that probably is affecting their lagging indicator. You do that, all of a sudden they're listening. Why? Because they should. Right? So if I can find something they didn't know about, they want to continue that experience. So they're going to give me 2 more minutes on that cold call. If I can find 2 more unknowns, they'll give me a discovery call. Why wouldn't they? If nothing else, how they're thinking about it in their head, I might not buy anything from this kid, but I will learn something. And that's what I want to do. Right? So the payoff to them is if they spend 45 minutes on a discovery call, if nothing else, they'll learn a lot about their problem. People will spend 45 minutes on a webinar all the time. Anyone, if there is anyone watching this right now, is a testament to that. People will spend time to learn all the time. I do it on YouTube all day. I do it in books all day. Warren Buffett spends 80% of his awake time reading. Why? So he can learn. That's Warren Buffett. Bill Gates, same thing. You cannot find someone who's that I've seen that's successful that doesn't read at least 2 to 3 hours a day. Why? Even at their state, they want to learn. So people will spend time with anyone to learn. People will pay a lot of money to get an instructor one-on-one versus like in a group. So do they value a demo time one-on-one like they do a consultant call? And the difference between those two is, do you find something for them on that cold call that they didn't already know? If nothing else, they're going to jump on the discovery call because they're like, that was amazing. I just found out 3 things I'm going to go check in on. Now I'm going to spend 30 minutes. I might not buy something at the end, is what they're thinking in their head. But every single time that you do that, you create demand and you create a reason of why they should trust you on how they should solve it, if they're going to solve it. A lot of people wanted to lose weight forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, but they wouldn't trust weight loss consultants. Why? Because it didn't work usually. In enters Ozempic, and all of a sudden people are just crutching and clawing for the solution. All of a sudden they believed that they were going to be successful because a lot of other people were. So one of the differentiators is not necessarily they don't see a problem that's big enough, is that they don't think that they can solve it. The more that you find things that they didn't know about, the more they think that they can solve it. Why? Because they now have you, right? So those are the 3 things that SDRs aren't asking around or aren't saying on the cold call that they should be, that will create demand. So I'm going to be really quick about these last 9, and then we're going to jump into the plot holes. I'm going to be faster about those. I'm going to shock everyone. Okay. Personalization. What I mean, that's not something they're saying on a cold call. What I mean by personalization is true personalization. I see a lot of hype in the market, like hyper personalization. Whoever is saying that, it doesn't exist. Personalization, simply put, from a definition perspective, is one-to-one. If I can say it to you and I can say it to someone else, it's not personalization. True personalization, I saw that you wrote this comment. I saw that you wrote this article. I saw that you said this the other day where you said X, Y, and Z. So I was curious to know if you've come across Flip the Script before. That cannot be faked, right? And it's the one thing that I don't see people doing. especially on email. Even if there's a tool that says that they can do it at scale, they can't. Why? Because they can't write the hook and they can't find the piece of personalized data that is relevant, right? So personalization is the fourth thing that I never, very rarely hear mentioned on cold calls, that will be more effective, especially in the opener, because they're jumping on that call thinking you know nothing. So if I say something extremely specific, then it buys the next 15 seconds for them to give you. So that's the fourth thing. And I don't mean personalization by relevance, as in I saw you attended this webinar. That's relevance. So one to many, however many that may be, even if it's 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 or 1 to 4, people who attend a webinar, people who attend an event, people who work at this company, people who are in hypergrowth, whatever it is, that's all relevance. The personalization is 1 to 1. Okay, the fifth thing, if there's, and this is going to be, I'm going to leave that one for last because this is the most tactical one. Elevator pitch number, the fifth thing that I don't hear very often is elevator pitch that they have to reference back to, points that they have to reference back to. Some of the data points like I talked about, and this is especially within the cold email, I could ask for a data point. If you don't mind me asking, what's your open rate? The reason that I ask is industry average is X, is between 15 and 25%, or what's your reply rate? The reason I ask is industry average is between 0.5 and 0.7, not positive reply rate, but overall reply rate. And anything below a 10% reply rate, it means that you have an email data hygiene problem. If you do me a favor, if you check back internally, and if you have anything over a 10% reply rate, I'll let you go. I might take some pointers from you, but I'll let you off the hook. But if it's anything below 8, if you give me 15 minutes, if nothing else, to unpack a couple of things that you can do about your data hygiene, considering 3.6% of data decay happens every single month, the average database. Either way, and then you're push pulling it from there off the back end. So data points that they have to reference back to, and giving them 2 brackets, and not ridiculous brackets of like, if you're below 100% conversion rate, if you're below a 99.9999999% server uptime, I'll leave you alone. Like, give them a real data point. If you're below a 40%, or if you're above a 40% open rate, I'll leave you alone. So with giving them 2 brackets of when you would leave them alone and when it would be relevant, hypothetically, for them to jump on the call with you. The sixth thing that reps aren't talking, SDRs aren't saying or asking on discovery calls, cold calls that they should be, is questions that are objective in nature after they get through the elevator pitch. After they get through the elevator pitch, if they identify with one of them, they're like, no, you're not just rambling here. That point on X was interesting. Most reps there try to close the call. They're like, great, we solved for that. Why don't you jump on the call Thursday too? You have to keep in mind, they've given you 1 data point at that point. 1. They're like, yeah, that's sort of relevant to us. It's like, what do you mean by sort of relevant? That's where I'd start that conversation. But they're giving you 1 single data point. You don't win when they say we have that problem. You win whenever you find 5 things that they didn't know. Anytime you find something they didn't know, that's when you win. Even if you run into the very, very slim, and I mean razor sharp freaking slim part of the market that was already in market and just hadn't called to do something about it yet. When you run into that person on a cold call, you just got lucky, number 1. Our numbers reflect that, number 2. And number 3, you still proven 0 credibility of why you're the one that will help them solve it the most effectively. How you do that is by finding things that they didn't know. This is the bucket that no AE or SDR is in. How do I find the things that they didn't know? They're just playing a numbers game. And our numbers sadly show it. And I don't think it's because they want to. I think it's because they think that's the only thing that they can do. Right? So you not only haven't proven any credibility of why you're better than the other 6 vendors, but the fourth one is you haven't lowered their hesitance towards the reality that they're going to make a move and not actually be successful when they do. That is where most deals are lost. So even if you get them on a discovery call, that's where most of the deals are lost. So I would start the ball rolling of them believing that they can do it by finding 3 things that they didn't know on that cold call. If you find 6 more on the discovery call, they won't even be calling competitors. Why? Because they realize that they just went through an experience that they haven't gone through before. It's one where a sales rep actually knew something more than they did. right? So you find enough of those. Not only you create the demand, you capitalize on that demand and discovery by finding a couple more. That is sales. That's where you're going to get them. So any kind of objective questions that are going to get there, objective questions that are going to find those unknowns is where you're on the right path. The seventh thing I don't hear SDRs after or ask on cold calls is questions around their specific metric. I would close my eyes. If you can't sit there, close your eyes, name your 4 buyer personas, and name at least their lagging indicator metric. But I would say 3 or 4 at minimum other metrics that they're measured on. It means that the cold calls are nothing. That's where you lose them. I am telling, my heart is breaking because I know the reality of people don't want to not book meetings. People don't want to not sell. People don't want to be unsuccessful at their job. I know that reality, but I also know what's behind it. Of if we don't know those data points that they're at least measured on, it does not matter what permission-based opener or what, relevance or what trick you do or what joke you make, or it doesn't matter. Once you get to that elevator pitch, if it's not hitting on things that they don't know that are objective, and especially if they say one and there are no questions asked or questions that go deeper or questions that find another unknown, that's where they're going to churn. You're going to lose them. So, around their metrics in specific, I hear a lot. I cannot tell you the amount of sales trainers that I've heard tell me we can't sell to sales enablement. And when I double click, I'm like, what do you mean by that? Why do you say that? They're like, yeah, well, they never know their metrics. I'm like, no, they never know the metrics that you're asking about. But you don't know their metrics. Their metrics are not conversion rate to close one. That's not their primary. Their primary is usually time to first deal, time to full ramp, training adoption, and product adoption. That's what their lagging indicator metrics are. So trainers will say, well, that's not important. That's what they should be measured on. I'm like, well, number one, that's an irrelevant discussion to what they are metriced on is what they should be metriced on. But number two, like relevance is to their metric. So the fact that you don't know that metric is the problem, right? Not that they don't know the conversion metrics. So questions that are around their metrics in specific. If you were to ask someone, if you ask yourself, how is my value prop different from this persona to this persona? And the answer is nothing or not entirely different, then that's a first litmus test of you don't solve 2 to 3 business problems overall. You solve 2 to 3 business problems per persona. That is the business problem, because a business problem is to their lagging indicator metric. Lagging indicator metric is to the persona. So it's like if the value prop to a sales ops leader and the value prop to a procurement leader are completely different. I'll also hear the advice, and then I promise I'm going to move on and we're going to finish out this section, is to settle procurement, you should help the sales leader, sell your case internally of how much they want it to procurement. I'm like, that is not going to work. It is not going to work. Certainly not long term, and certainly not effectively. It might work 0.01%. Right? What will help is finding out what the procurement leader is measured on and how your solution or your product helps the procurement leader hit their metrics. That's what will help. Or the CFO hit their metrics. That's what will help sell the case internally. Is it's completely contextualized their metrics. You cannot reuse a value prop set from persona to persona. It means that you're benefit centric at best, save time, save money, and ROI driven. But that is the seventh one, is that it's around their metrics. To an unknown is the eighth one. The ninth thing that I don't see SDRs doing is double clicking when they have a data point. The prospect coughs one up. They're like, yeah, so that the one is interesting around network latency. And again, 10 times out of 10, they're like, great. We sell to that. How's Thursday at 2? I'm like, it's not time to book the meeting. The save all, the default question, they're like, that one on network latency is interesting. If you want a default question, you can ask, what do you mean by that? And they're like, well, we've been having a lot of network latency problems recently. Originally we were actually doing quite well, but then we started doing a couple of backup tests and backup tests. We started doing them more regularly and we started failing more. And all of a sudden we saw, we thought that we needed some more storage. We bought a little bit more storage, about 20% more, but that didn't fix the problem. So we saw our server go down, a couple of weeks ago, and it didn't go down for that long, but it was enough to make us worried. There is so many data points that I don't know that I can ask about there. I'm like, you said that it went down, that your network latency went up recently. What it go up? What it go to? How historically, where was it for the last year? When you say recently, when do you mean recently? Yesterday, a week ago, 2 weeks ago? You said that you started doing more backup success tests. How many were you doing? How many did you do recently when you said your success rate dropped? What do you mean you saw a server outage or you bought more storage? You said 20% increase, but how much storage do you have before? How much do you have now? And then you say you had a server downtime bout. When was that? Can you describe the nature of it? How long was it? How many clients do you have? Like, there's so many questions that I need in that data set alone. And I see reps go straight through it. They're like, great, well, we settled that house Thursday at 2. And I'm like, they might jump on the call, but it's to buy despite you, not because of you. That they're like, oh, I might need this. The sad thing is I hear prospects, they'll get excited when they find out something that they could use it for. They'll tell the sales rep about it. And the sales rep's like, great. And then they change the subject. I'm like, your buyer just showed you that they self-diagnosed something else on the call that they didn't know. Not only did you not find that for them, you're uninterested in it. And you're going to keep talking about the stuff that they already know. So that is the 9th one. The 10th one is they aren't setting a meeting based on an unknown that was found. That's your strongest use case. If you found something you didn't know, that's what the meeting in part should be about to go further on that. You didn't find the boulder, the 11th thing, and then we're going to go to the plot holes list. I tell SDRs a lot, or originally how it was pitched to me, is like if there was, SDRs, and this is me for a long time, that I'm like, I don't want to call them. I feel nervous calling them. I feel bad calling them. I feel like I'm interrupting them. I feel like I'm wasting their time. I feel like I'm interrupting their day. And I'm like, that is all true, unless you are finding something that they didn't know about that's going to hurt them. If I see someone walking into oncoming traffic, I'm not worried about interrupting their day by pulling them back by the collar. I'm like, buddy. And then after they realize what's happening, they're like, oh, thank you. I had an interesting experience when I was flying back from Texas to Paris a couple days ago. I was in line for going through security. And there was a woman that was basically in the next line. And I saw that her backpack was wide open. Not only wide open, but there was stuff about to fall out. And one of the things that was about to fall out was her cell phone. That I usually don't insert myself into people's day, but I'm like, oh my gosh, if I were her, I would want to know this. So that wasn't the interesting thing. The interesting thing was I said, excuse me, and she didn't hear me. And her friend was next to her and she didn't tap her, because she thought, who knows what she thought that I wanted. So I tapped her on the shoulder. I said, excuse me. And she looked pissed when she turned around. She goes, yes. And I said, your backpack's open and your phone's about to fall out. And she was like, oh. And the mood completely changed. She was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And her friend goes, really? Oh, thank you so much. They went from, who are you? What do you want? To they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you caught this kind of thing. That's what a cold call should be. They're thinking that you're after just selling them. But once they realize that you found something that is a pretty big problem for them, if they didn't know, you're their best friend. Why? Because you were. If her phone would have fallen out, sometimes if I see people's backpack unzipped, but I'm like, there's nothing in there, and it looks like nothing's going to fall out, and it's only partially unzipped, I'm like, screw it. Truly, I'm like, screw it. I don't want to interrupt him, blah, blah. Like, it's a problem, but it's one that's not even that bad. But in this case scenario, I'm like, it's gaping open and she's going to lose her phone and she doesn't realize, and this is at the airport, right? That's a big, big problem. And so their demeanor changes because your demeanor was after helping them first. So that's what a cold call should be. They go in thinking that they're not going to find anything. But the minute that you find 3 unknowns, voila, the call just turned into something that they want to be a part of. So in the last one, well, that's a tactical one. So I'm going to leave that one, and that's the 12th one anyway. So those are the 11 things that SDRs aren't saying. The thing I wanted to end on in this section, we're going to go to plot holes. The thing I wanted to end on in this section is there are a number of different videos. I probably watch, I don't know, you're going to call me a loser, but I would say 150 videos on conformity gate. Conformity gate. Different creators saying like, oh, conformity gate's going to happen. Conformity gate's not going to happen. There is a Stranger Things episode. There isn't, is not. And as I go through the videos, I see more and more of things that I already know, right? And I'm kind of annoyed by them. It'll be like, this is confirms blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I already know all this crap. And I listened to one earlier that how he led, the way that he was leading and the pace at which he was leading, I was like, he's going to hit things that I already knew. And within 45 seconds, he dropped one that I didn't know. And I was like, interesting. So it earned my attention for the next minute. And then I watched a 15-minute video in total. And I was so thankful. I very rarely leave a YouTube comment, but I was like, dude, this video is killer. Unbelievable on things that I did not know beforehand. I didn't know him beforehand. And when he started, I'm like, this is not worth my time. I ended that video being like, this is the best video that I've ever seen. Not because he was nice, but because he found things that I didn't know beforehand. So that is the theme, SDR or AE on the cold call, on discovery call, or on cold email. That is the thesis. That is a discussion. That is the whole thing at bay is, do I find things that the person didn't know about is going to dictate whether they're going to respond and whether they're going to think that you have value or not, going to continue on the conversation. Okay, so section 3. Now it's rapid fire time. The ending. The reason I didn't make a video on this is because truly, I was heartbroken by the ending, by episode 8. Not because I was like that sad, but because I love the Stranger Things series. I really do. I love it from so many different angles. I love what it teaches you. I love the idea of underdogs. I love the idea of valuing people, of believing people, of, giving people the benefit of the doubt. It's such an incredible series. And I was so heartbroken because, I just left the theater. I'm like, that's it? Meaning, I'm like, that's it? Everything ends up, rosy cheeked, how everyone wants to. I felt like I was gutted by the last episode. So much so to where when I woke up for the next couple of days, I was just like, I felt like it wasn't real, almost, that I thought there were so many holes. So when I started thinking back through it, there was a number of plot holes that I thought that they were going to address, but there weren't that many. There weren't plot holes. There were just things that they needed to answer, in my opinion. But I'm like, it's the Duffer Brothers. They're going to answer everything into oblivion. And every single interview that I had seen, I've seen it gotten into a lot of series only to be kind of decimated in the last season or the last episode. A great example of that is You. Season 5 was, not so great. So the reason that I had a hard time doing this episode was I didn't want to dog the Duffer Brothers. And I'm like, you've given me so much value. That series has been so incredible. It's meant so much to me. I didn't want to destroy the Duffer Brothers. So I didn't want to do this 5th episode. That I was like, it wasn't that I didn't want to say that I'm wrong. It was, first of all, I wasn't even close to right. It was that I didn't want to drill the Duffer Brothers into the ground when I think they've been so incredible so far. But I started making a list and I'm like, not only did they not answer these questions, they created about 150 plot holes by how they ended it. So I'm going to go, the reason that I have the temerity to do it now is I know it's not the end. I know it's not the last episode. And one of the reasons that I know is when they were doing interviews to kind of answer some of the plot holes that they created, their answers to those plot holes were lackluster. Why? Because it's an episode that's not real. So they were having to do the math in their head of, hypothetically, if this was the end, how would I answer this as the plot hole that I created? Because of course it was created because it wasn't the real end. So I'm going to rapid fire go through some of the plot holes, and then we're going to get back into sales, and we're going to finish off with 111 clues that it isn't over. Okay, plot hole number one. What happened to Vicky? She wasn't mentioned in the epilogue at all. You're going to tell me that you have 50 minutes of epilogue and Vicky just completely disappears. Number two, what happened to Murray? I mean, he essentially wasn't in the epilogue at all. He was in the graduation ceremony in the crowd, but how his story tied up is there was no answer to it. Number three, was Murray a spy? That was one that was hugely open. A lot of people believed it. I believe that he was a Russian spy for sure. That wasn't answered at all. Number four, there was no closure for Ted Wheeler. Ted Wheeler was hurt in the very first episode, almost to the point of death. That is the last that we hear from him until the epilogue and the graduation ceremony where he says language. So there was no close off to that. Number five, was Ted a U.S. spy, which I believe that he was. That wasn't answered by the epilogue. Number six, there was no closure for Karen. Karen Wheeler of like, how did she evolve? What did she learn? There was no closure arc for having a 50-minute period of epilogue. You're going to tell me that you don't answer anything for Karen Wheeler. What happened to her? What does she want to do next? X, Y, and Z. That was a plot hole that happened. Number seven, was Karen related to Henry Creel? There's a big theory going around on whether she was answered to Henry Creel. The Duffer Brothers have a very great habit, I would say, of taking some of the fan theories and kind of almost teasing them with it. So a great example of that is everyone thought Steve would die, which who knows, maybe he did in the real ending that I believe is going to happen tonight. But they have a habit of kind of teasing people with the theories that they come up with, you know, of including it, basically breaking the fourth wall style within the episode itself. And so a great example of that, there was a huge fan theory that Karen Wheeler was essentially Henry Creel's sister, Alice Creel. But they didn't answer that. Excuse me. Number eight, where were all the Demogorgons and the Demobats? So that was a huge one that a lot of people noticed. Within Dimension X itself, there was no Demogorgons or Demobats. And before anyone says, well, in the one of the interviews, the Duffer Brothers were asked about it. This is something that I've never seen online. The Duffer Brothers were asked about it, and they said, oh, well, Vecna was caught by surprise, and that's why there were no Demogorgons and Demobats, which its bad answer is a lackluster answer because it's not real. You know, and everyone's blowing them up of like, how would he not think that it was a surprise? How would it be a surprise attack, number one? And why would that mean that there are no Demogorgons and Demobats? That is what's online. The thing that is not online that I haven't seen anyone talk about is I rewatched episode 8, I don't know, 3 or 4 times looking for like existential meaning. And in the third rewatch, there is a line when you go up to, when the kids originally go up to Dimension X, where Lucas, you can literally watch the replay. Lucas says, I don't know about you guys, but I think that it's weird that there are no monsters or no Demogorgons or Demobats here in the upside or here in Dimension X. I just thought that they would be included. And then it transitions to Dustin, and Dustin says, well, we don't know if Henry's dead. And if Henry is dead, that makes that essentially makes sense that there would be no Demogorgons and Demobats. Number one, it doesn't, now because they're controlled by the Mind Flayer. But number two is Henry Creel wasn't dead yet. Obviously, he was still Vecna within the heart. But number three is you're telling me that the Duffer Brothers didn't think through that the Demogorgons and Demobats should have been included, and that it was so much of an afterthought. But then they thought through writing a line for Lucas to say, why are there no Demogorgons and Demobats here in the Abyss and here in Dimension X? Like, it is them literally suggesting to the audience that there should be Demogorgons and Demobats in there, and that it's weird that there aren't. But then Dustin saying, well, if Henry was dead, it would make sense that they're gone, which that math doesn't add up when you know from the outsider's perspective that they're linked to the Mind Flayer, not to Vecna or not to Henry. But even if Henry was, and Henry's not dead, you know that as the audience, but even if they were, why would they call attention to it as the writers? They wrote that line. You have to keep in mind the writing process. Number one, it takes years. Number two, it takes edits. Number three, it takes the cast reading through it. But you're telling me that out of the 8,000 people that worked on season 5, that not one of them thought, it says it right here. Why are there no Demogorgons and Demobats? They saw through that hole. They included that as a whole, as a signal to the audience that it isn't real. The whole thing was covered in yellow in Dimension X. Why? Because it's a warning sign. It's a warning sign to everyone that it is not real. It is just Mike conjuring up, what he thought Dimension X would look like hypothetically if he was in it. You had to keep in mind he had no experience of being in the abyss and being Dimension X. He only knew that there was someone who had mentioned it. Number 9, what is the right side up? So number 8, the 8th episode is called The Right Side Up. And people took it as, and I did originally too, the opposite of the upside down. But it's not when you think about it. The upside down means the earth, the Hawkins, is just, flipped upside down. But the right side being up is a direction. So in the entire season 5, the wormhole is represented as the top is Dimension X and that the bottom is Hawkins, which completely makes sense of anything that's on the right side that's up is wrong, right? So people have been mentioning about the doorknob within Mike's basement, that normally it was on the left side and now it's on the right side. I'm like, right, because the right side that's up is wrong. So another example of that I haven't seen online, that when Mike and Hopper are talking in that town square, which keep in mind when he comes to meet him at the bench there, that memorial, it is the shape of it is an X, which we know that anything X marks a lie. X marks something that's not true, right? So they're sitting in the middle of an X. And when Hopper is talking about the reality of what decision Mike can choose, he said you can, basically you can either question everything and torture yourself with it or blah, 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 and he looks to the left whenever he's saying all of that. He's like, you can question everything and, keep going over details in your head and why could she do this? And he looks over to the left so dramatically when he's doing this that Mike kind of looks at his eyes, and he looks to the left because he's like, what is he looking at? And then Hopper turns to the right, which right side is up, which means wrong. And he says, or you can just accept it. Accept everything. And Mike's head kind of changes with him and he looks confused of why Hopper is going left and right. It's because when he's looking to the right, he's signaling that what he's talking about is the wrong thing to do. That accepting it and just being happy and just trying to move on, because Mike was like, I don't want to move on because it doesn't feel real, because it's not. And so Hopper's looking that direction, and episode 8 is like the right side is up because it's everything that quote unquote looks right but is a nightmare. It's actually not the truth because Mike's in a trance. Number 10, there's no clear another plot hole is there's no clear distinction between the mind flayer and the mind flayer and Vecna, and the upside down in Dimension X. So for one, they call the abyss, they call Dimension X for some reason the abyss in the trans. They don't call them one for one, but there's no clear distinction that's made that would have to have been made by the end of the series is what is the difference between the mind flayer and Vecna, who controlled who. For all the series that we knew that it was a cloud particle, it was not a physical being, which I'll get to in a second of why I think it was kind of that meat flayer that it was. But there was no clear distinction between the mind flayer and between Vecna and between the abyss and the upside down, and what was the difference there, which is something that would have been ironed out for it to be an actual end. What was Holly? Why did he choose her? That was another thing that we did not get the answer to. Why was she special? Or number 12, did she have powers? What were those powers? Did she create that door that she walked through within Dimension X or within the abyss with Max? Number 14, you didn't have a actual explanation between the lack of closeness between Mike and Nancy. I had thought that entire time it's because they're not true siblings, that Nancy's true father was Dr. Brenner, not Ted Wheeler, but you never got an answer of why there was a huge gap emotionally between Mike and Nancy, so much so to where most people forgot that they were siblings. Number 15, it didn't explain why Billy, Barb, Eddie, Chrissy, Patrick, and Fred, which was the newspaper kid who worked with Nancy, are dead, but why everyone else was alive and where they are. You never saw them, ever again, and that was never answered. Number 16, did the hole that they created in the wormhole just close up? And so you saw, I think it was in episode 4 or 5, basically, there was a hole that was poked in the wormhole, and 11 and Hopper and 8 almost got sucked out by it. But then she puts her powers and she blocks it, and then she goes on. So if there's one hole that was poked out, because they thought that the wormhole was essentially Holly was in the middle of it, but wasn't the truth. So once they poked the hole through the wormhole, everything started flooding out of it, but then it just stopped. There was no explanation of like, did anything else suck out of the wormhole? Did it just repair itself? Like that was a pretty strong wall. 11 couldn't even get through it with her powers. But then all of a sudden, magically, some holes poked out, some stuff goes out of it with a fight like speed of a tornado that basically 11 had to use all her powers to not be sucked up by, but then it just closed itself up. Nothing else leaked out of it. Number 17, Will's ending is in a bar. That is his, glorious ending is in a bar. Number 18, there was no real ending for Erica. Number 19, there was no tie-in of the play in Patty Newby. So you'll notice in the original play bill that was given by Max, which I'm going to go into why that's a sign that it isn't actually real. But in the play bill, essentially, it lists that Max sees in his memory. There's a whole bunch of characters that are listed. Alan Munson, Joyce, Hopper, because Joyce was running the play, Hopper, Mr. and Mrs. Wheeler, and Patty Newby. It was giving you a big sign of what happened in the first shadow, which is actually the stage play, which it, with the ending, quote unquote, ending as is, it relatively left open. But essentially, the hole that it left open is what is that interplay between all the characters. So Joyce and Hopper for the entire series, which in the first shadow, you find out that all these characters actually grew up with one another. Henry, Alan Munson, which is Eddie's father, Joyce, Hopper, and both of the Wheelers, Ted and Karen Wheeler, all grew up with each other. And that Joyce ran a play where Henry Creel and Patty Newby, which was Radio Shack Bob's half sister, were the leads. And the play was called Dark Side of the Moon. So they brought that playbill up to bring those in as elements. And then they never closed that loop on what did that play mean. And they brought in two very interesting concepts. Number one, that Patty Newby existed, which is who Henry fell in love with. And then they didn't close it off. And the second one was that Joyce and Hopper knew Henry Creel from years ago. So you're going to tell me that in the entire ending of season 5, that not once does Joyce or Hopper bring up the fact that they knew Henry Creel? They're not like, oh, hey, this guy we actually went to school with. Not in the entire episode, not in the entire ending of all of season 5. Are they going to even bring that up? It would make sense if the Duffer Brothers had done one of two things: left all of the first shadow information out of it, or brought that information in and then used it to close the loop. That's what I believe they did. But with this as a quote unquote ending, none of that information is used. So you'll notice in episode 4, basically right before you find out if Will has powers, Joyce stands up to Henry, stands up to Vecna. And Vecna, instead of he doesn't kill her. He kills all the military guards, but he doesn't kill her. He just throws her aside. But before he does that, she says, "Don't you come near him." And she says it with an air of familiarity. It's because they know each other. They grew up together, which I believe is the reason that he took Will to begin with. Is, long story short, he thinks that Joyce is the bad guy, and doesn't want him and Patty together, and that she was part of the ensemble that helped kill Patty off, which is the main love of his life, who he thinks is currently dead. I think that she's therapist Kelly still, and he thinks that she's dead when she's not. So why bring in Patty Newby, and why bring in the fact that they were all in a play together and that Henry starred in Joyce's play if you're not even going to mention in the ending as stands that Joyce and Hopper actually knew each other? Like that Joyce wasn't like, hey, I actually know Henry Creel. Here's some information about him that would be helpful in killing him. So there's a plot hole that's completely left open with the opening as is. There is no head nod to the relationship of the past. Did Joyce and Hopper not know that it was Henry, or know that it was Henry? Number 23, you don't know if Alice was dead. Was she the Alice Creel, meaning Henry's sister? There is a whole bunch of theories that Alice wasn't actually dead. They have no closure to that. I believe she might have been. I don't think that she's Karen Wheeler. I'm not positive on that, but I don't think that she's Karen Wheeler. I think that Karen Wheeler had Nancy with Dr. Brenner. I don't think that she's Alice Creel, but you don't see an ending or a close off to that loop on was she Karen Wheeler or was she Alice Creel, or who Alice Creel actually was, if she was still alive. I think that she was the cop likely in season 1 that got killed where her eyes bled out. And she killed off Benny at the beginning, but that's another plot hole that wasn't mentioned. Number 24, Max's mom wasn't at graduation or in the entire series. She wasn't in it at all. Number 25, there was no explanation at all of why Will was taken. As is, we still have zero clue on why Vecna chose Will. So it's a huge plot hole of why was he taken at all? It's a question that wasn't answered. There's no explanation of between Dustin and how he got the crap beat out of him from the boys of the grave. So as is, Dustin with the Hellfire shirt went to the grave, and there was all those popular boys that tried to kill him. Essentially, they said Hellfire ends with you, and it ends tonight, meaning they were about to kill him. And then he takes paint thinner. Gotta love Dustin. You know, when there was that dead snake at the grave, he takes paint thinner and throws it in all 4 of their eyes. You know, and that's the last scene that you see, is basically them beating the crap out of Dustin. Then you see Dustin show up, and he doesn't even explain what happened to Steve and everyone else. But that's the last that you hear of it. What happened to those boys? Did they die? Did Dustin beat them up? Did they actually go blind? They certainly weren't blind at graduation. You don't even see him at graduation. You know, so what happened there was a huge plot hole. You have to keep in mind and I mean this, no matter how it ends, the Duffer Brothers are brilliant. I mean, I am talking brilliant. When I look through this, as if there is an episode 9 and as if we're getting that tonight, some of the illusions that they were making, I'm like, are unbelievable. Like, one example I didn't even put on this list is they said that they wanted it in theaters because they wanted to see fans' reactions. And I took that as a little bit of a narcissistic thing of like, you want to see how it affects us. But I was like, well, you know, that's fair after all the work that they've done. And they didn't want to see the reactions as in they wanted to see how much we cried. They wanted to see the reactions as in who bought it. Who bought it? Who was mad? Who was like, who accepted it? There was a couple people in the theater. I saw it twice at the original time, which was all true blue, like live in your basement nerds, you know, and no one was crying. Everyone walked out of there in just utter silence. I think everyone was confused and kind of shocked. And then I saw it second time at 10:30, and there's a lot of people crying because they're like, that is such a meaningful ending. I'm like, I don't think you get it then. I was pissed. That I was like, how could they do this? And so I think they were an example of that brilliance is they said, we want to see people's reactions. Everyone took it as they want to see how much we're moved. What they really, I think, meant is who bought it? Who didn't buy it? Were people mad? Were people not mad? Keep in mind, the Duffer Brothers have said nothing since. They haven't said that it's not true. They haven't denied it. None of the cast has denied it. If I were the Duffer Brothers and I saw a conformity gate going viral, if I loved my fan base, which I know they do, I would say, hey, y'all, it's not real. Episode 9 is not real. We just messed up. Maybe we'll rewrite it. We're so sorry. Thank you for the opportunity. But I would have killed it right then. No, this is not real. I wouldn't let people hang themselves. You know, but thus they have for the last 2 weeks of just go on and on and on. I'm like, I know that they wouldn't do that. You know, but point being, that was a hole. There was no hole on. There was no close off on the communication gap. So there's a big theory on like Steve and Dustin not communication is a big issue. Anytime that 2 people aren't communicating or they turn off their walkie-talkies, it's a big issue because it's part of the greater theme of whatever you have to do, you have to keep talking in relationships. Even if you mess up, even if they say friends don't lie, but they lied all the time. Even when that happened, even when Lucas said that 11 was a traitor, even when on and on and on, someone said they're sorry and then it repaired. Even when Steve beat the crap out or got in a fight with Jonathan, he went back to his house to say he was sorry. You know, and that's what repaired it. So there was no closure of that entire theme. There was no closure on why didn't Will feel the killing of Vecna when Vecna was killed and Will was sitting essentially right beforehand, and this is number 28, essentially right beforehand, Vecna got shot in the hand and Will didn't feel it. Will felt it. Like he even mimicked Vecna's behavior and his posture of what he's doing. But then you're telling me that Vecna gets essentially decimated by 11, and then his head chopped off. Joyce hacks away at him 11 times, his head completely chopped off of his body, and you're telling me that Will felt nothing? He was standing right there. So there's a plot hole right there. Number 29, there's no closure for Derek and where his character went in the epilogue. Number 30, why wasn't he at the board? I don't know what that one means. 31, no closure for Terry Ives, 11's mom, of like where she went and why he, I know why he wasn't at the board. I was wrong on that one though. No closure for Terry Ives. What happened to 11's mom? You know, essentially when she went there in season 2, and Terry Ives' sister, Becky Ives, essentially found out that Terry wasn't lying the entire time and that her daughter was real and she did exist. And then essentially she calls the FBI. 11 hears that and leaves in the meantime. There's no closure of like, wouldn't Becky go to the cops? Hey, my sister was telling the truth. Hey, there was actually a daughter. You know, she did actually have a daughter. Hey, she isn't crazy. Hey, maybe we should get her some help. Like none of that happened, which is a huge, I'm not going to call it a plot hole, but it's something that there was no closure to. Number 32, there was no real closure for Dr. Brenner of like what his role was in everything. You saw that Dr. Brenner, quote unquote, left his journal, which is, it's very interesting that, which I had it listed as a plot hole later. Essentially, Dr. Brenner, he left his journal in the upside down, which makes no sense. These were all things that happened essentially after 11 broke open the gate. Dr. Brenner's whole goal the entire time was to open gates. We find that out in season 5. And the reason was his father went to Dimension X, and he was the first one who went to Dimension X with a whole bunch of people. He came back, and him and a Russian scientist were the only 2 that survived. The Russian scientist is the one that stole the Mind Flayer particles and some equipment, went to the cave, and then Henry found him. And essentially Henry killed him and then touched the Mind Flayer particle and went to the Dimension X himself. That's how he got in his butt originally. So Dr. Brenner's father, when he died, he said that like his entire goal was to essentially open gates between the dimension that he saw and Hawkins. So Dr. Brenner, his entire goal that entire time was to fulfill his father's dream. I believe that Dr. Brenner was 000, meaning the first patient, and that 001 was Henry, meaning the second quote unquote patient, because he's the first one who touched the Mind Flayer particles. But essentially, Dr. Brenner, there's no closure on his loop, and he started creating that journal once 11 touched the Mind Flayer particles, is the exact point where the first gate essentially was opened. That's when he started taking notes, allegedly. Okay, Dr. Brenner was never in the upside down after that. So how did his journal with all of those notes about those gates get into the upside down? It's a major plot hole. And the next piece about that is in season 3, you find out when Dr. Brenner is making drawings for 10 to see. 10 says, he goes, it's a dog. And he says, it's actually a cow. And he goes, well, it looks like a dog. And he goes, well, I'm not a good artist. And it's true. You look at the picture and you're like, that looks like a dog, not a cow. So he goes from not being a great drawer to all of a sudden being this immaculate artist in Dustin's journal. Like you see these drawings and they're extremely, well drawn, all these details to him. And I'm like, it's a small plot hole, but it's a big plot hole, because I'm like, Duffer Brothers don't make mistakes. It is almost what these video producers have been saying regarding all of the collateral and all the stage settings on Stranger Things. They're like, it is physically impossible to make this many mistakes. For the Duffer Brothers, they don't make mistakes. They just don't. They're that thoughtful. They're that thoughtful. And you're going to tell me that they miss the color dial on the, at the hawk, that they completely miss the color dial. Not only did they miss the dial color changing, they would have physically had to import another dial that looked completely different. Why? It is not possible. This amount of mistake is complete. It's just not possible by accident. So there was no guilt. Dr. Brenner, we don't close the loop on him at all. Who was he? Why did he create those gates? Why was his journal in the upside down? There was no guilt that he had created the gate. There was no closure between his role and involvement in that. 36, there's no closure on Henry. Looked exactly like Dr. Brenner. So essentially, the message of Stranger Things, one of the messages is, if we aren't careful, we don't realize that we're also the monster. They have broken the fourth wall. The whole goal of this is for a couple things to happen. For a certain amount of people like me, dweeby people, to believe that there's another episode, and for everyone to say it's not possible. Just like people were saying to Joyce, and just like people were saying to Jonathan, you just need to let it go and you need to move on, just like they're saying to Mike. The other piece is it's hard to believe, just like it was hard to believe that Eddie wasn't like he didn't kill Chrissy, and that it was hard to believe that Chrissy was buying drugs from him. It was really hard to believe, and people wanted Eddie dead because of that when it was something that's not true. But the other piece here is that people lash out and they get herd crowd mentality when this happens. I have been watching the Duffer Brothers social media. It is bananas. People are like, I mean, saying awful, disgusting things to them and awful, disgusting things to the cast, even after 4 seasons of immaculate writing. They are just destroying them online. They're like, you could never write. I don't know why anyone ever was into this. Why? Because of a misunderstanding that they don't realize there's another episode. So what they're trying to do with this, if they do this next episode, it's in the documentary, it is a mythic move. It is not only will you break the internet's already broken over this, but you will change cinema because they're trying to show you that the stranger, it's not like, stop comparing yourself. It's not I did something bad, but they did something worse. It's not I'm strange, but they're strangers, so let's make fun of them. It's like out of all of these things, the stranger thing is not the Upside Down, and it's not Dimension X. It's Hawkins, and that Hawkins thinks that it's much better than the Upside Down when you have Dart that's a Demogorgon, who, even though his nature is a Demogorgon, let Dustin and the others by, and that you have, you know, at this town hall, they say that Hellfire is a cult, even though Erica stands up and says, no, it's not, it's a game. And Lucas says to those boys, no, it's not, it's a game. They refuse to listen to it, and they're going after Eddie, even after Jason sees his friend Patrick 50 yards apart from Eddie go up into the sky, all of his limbs break. He still blames it on Eddie, even though he saw it, that they're like, kill them all. Just like people are doing the Duffer Brothers right now. They're like, horrible writing, you ruined a series, da da da. So it's like, put the torch down. Put the torch down. It is wild seeing this, that they are breaking the fourth wall and essentially showing us of like, there's a lot of confusion in the last couple of seasons. Who's the monster? The kids are like, no, it's Max. And they're like, no, it's Henry. So I believe that Henry, the way he looks, he's wearing that vest that looks exactly like Dr. Brenner's. He stands like him. He's got a watch like him. He's got a tie like him. He's got kids like him. He's like, I'm protecting you from the monsters. Because Dr. Brenner thought he was protecting those children. Just like Henry thinks that he's protecting those children. Because in his head, he was chased out of Hawkins and almost burned to the ground for something he did not do wrong. He was not demonic at that point. He didn't, you know, all he was a kid that wandered into a cave. So they're trying to break the fourth wall to show us that we in the audience are the exact same thing, that we're the monster too. And they're doing a heck of a job. I mean, you have people online that are being savage about that. So when you see the thing that the plot hole 32 was that Henry is dressed exactly like Dr. Brenner. They didn't bring that full circle. He's trying to do the exact same thing that Dr. Brenner was, you know, and even though he said he's like, Papa's evil, you know, he did all these things to these kids when they didn't deserve it. I didn't want to be under his control. And then he says, I didn't want to be under his control. And when he couldn't control me, he tried to reproduce me. And now he's doing that exact same thing with these kids. So like, we can't see it when we're doing the exact thing that we thought that we weren't, that we thought is the exact thing that we wanted dead. Right. And so they didn't bring even that full circle of why does Henry look exactly, even the time watch that he has, that he's timing everything looks exactly like Dr. Brenner. So they didn't bring that full circle. They didn't bring full circle or no closure on the blue versus red theme, which one's good and which one's bad. They brought no circle for Alan Munson being on the playbill. They didn't bring number 39. Why did Joyce not realize when when Will was occupying Henry, the backstory of like, I can buy hypothetically that Joyce didn't know it was Henry this entire time. It's incredibly hard to believe. But why did she not understand when they were lying, like at the minute that they knew the name Henry, okay, which was season 5, you're going to tell me that Joyce doesn't even raise her hand and be like, huh, I wonder if that's Henry Creel. She knew the house. She knows the dad. She knows the backstory. Will, her son, she's staring at him occupying Henry. And she doesn't even say anything. I can't believe that. Number 41, the kids coughed up. Oh, here's a big one. The kids coughed up particles in season 5. Like when they went to the mine, you'll notice that all the kids except for Derek coughed up particles, which are mind flayer particles. The exact same that Will coughed up particles after the mind flayer was kicked out of his blood, which the mind flayer wasn't dead at that point. So there's a huge plot hole. Is the mind flayer can't be dead if those kids coughed up particles after Vecna was killed. Number 42, there was no closure on when the when the Demogorgon, quote unquote, moved the lock in season 1 when he was going after Will. Like, one of the big plot holes that people have talked about for a long time is when Will ran to his house and then he locked the door, and then the Demogorgon moved the lock off and had telekinetic powers. Demogorgons didn't have that power. Who did have that power was Henry, though. So there was no plot closure on that, which was one that was brought up a lot. So it's hard for me to believe that the Duffer Brothers didn't know it, of why did that lock move whenever Demogorgons didn't have telekinetic powers, and apparently a Demogorgon is who took Will. Even in an interview, at one point they're asked about it, and the only line that they say is, "You're right, Demogorgons do not have telekinetic power." And then they move on. So it's telling you of like, that couldn't have been a Demogorgon. Henry had to have been involved in that, but they didn't close off that plot hole. 43, you have no idea where 8's mom is. You never go full circle on that. Number 44, how did Virginia Creel, you never get an answer of why Virginia Creel, Henry's mom, knew to send Henry to Dr. Brenner if she had never met him. I think it's because she essentially, when Victor Creel went over to war, she yin-yanged with Dr. Brenner and had Henry Creel. So I believe Henry Creel's father is Dr. Brenner, not Victor Creel. And that was the one thing that she was afraid of, or that Henry Creel, or Henry essentially amplified in her dream, was spiders, because I think she was ashamed of the fact that she had Henry with Dr. Brenner and not with Victor, and she cheated on him. So essentially, how would Virginia Creel even know that Dr. Brenner existed unless she had some pre-existing history with him? There's no reason of why she would know that. So you have no closure on that. You have no closure on the pregnant women. You have no closure or mention of Susie, which was Dustin's girlfriend. You have no closure or mention of Dr. Owens. You have no closure or mention, number 47, of Dr. K. Why was Dr. K there? Did she just evaporate after everything happened? Like, did she just go away? Where did the military go? Number 48, you have no, why did the crew not know that the military would be on the other side whenever they came through? You have no answer for that. 49, why would the military just let everyone off the hook for killing officers? They kill multiple officers. Jim Hopper kills multiple officers. He is a part of a huge plan of like, why would they make him the chief of police just like that after he comes back? They, for all intents and purposes, thought Hopper was dead. He was in a Russian jail, right? They thought that he had died in a mall fire years ago, and all of a sudden Hopper shows up, and there's no questions of like, hey, where'd you come from? He just becomes the chief of police all of a sudden like that. There's no closure for the Russian guard that kind of turned good and helped out Hopper on the end. There's no closure or mentions of the Russians at all after season 3. Like, essentially, the Russians aren't even brought up again. There is no closure on the weird flowers in the cave. This is number 52. So at the end of season 1, basically the boys, after the entire campaign, are like, what? That's it? They're, kind of like Max. They're like, what? That's it? They're like, what happened to the proud princess? What happened to the valiant knight? And what happened to the weird flowers in the cave? Everything is illusion with the Duffer Brothers. There is no closure, certainly on the flowers in the cave. I'm like, what flowers are they talking about in what cave? I do think in the real ending that's going to be the Demogorgons are going to turn into flowers that go in the caves that are underneath Hawken that aren't the Upside Down anymore. On a side note, but there's no closure on that. There is no closure. Are y'all having fun? We're at an hour 39. I am having a blast. Honestly, I ironed out my entire evening for this. It's 8:59 in Paris. I'm still going strong. I am going to go through these potholes, and then we're going to do all the signs. If you have to leave, I understand. I hope that you won't. I hope y'all are having fun. I'm having a blast, honestly. I wouldn't say I'm having more fun than I did in the series. I think I'm having equal fun. But I hope that y'all are still out there, that you can tune back in. I think the final episode will come out tonight. I think it will be in the documentary, so that's why I'm doing all of this tonight. But anywho, I just wanted to give a head nod, or to anyone who's still hanging on the line here with me. Number 53. Did Karen know the whole time? Here's a huge plot hole. So Karen's unaware of anything that's happening in her house the entire time, which is extremely hard to believe, and extremely hard to believe for Ted as well, which I have a number of different theories of what was actually going on. So you're telling me that she didn't know about any of this. Let's take that in the box. Okay. Let's say that's real, which is not. Let's say for a second though. You're telling me that after she doesn't believe this entire time, and then a Demogorgon rips into her bath time and tries to take her daughter, and then slices her across the throat so badly she almost dies. And then she magically knows the name of Mr. What's-It was Henry somehow. And then Holly's taken, and she thinks her daughter's going to die. And then the rest of her kids go into Dimension X and go find her daughter, Holly, and then brings her back. Did she still not know anything? She saw a Demogorgon. So there's still no head nod to what the was that? Or that she goes and she puts tanks of O in the dryer, which is pretty hard to believe, and then they blow up, and she blows up some Demogorgons. At that point, she doesn't write on her little pad, what are those things? She seems to all of a sudden be just completely magically caught up to speed. So there's no closure on Karen if she knew the whole time. 54, there's no closure on Ted and Karen. If they realized everything that was going on, the point that they did, especially for Ted. 55, how did Max graduate when she was in a coma for 2 years? Number 56, why were Max's parents never at the hospital? Max goes into a coma for 2 years, and you never see any footage of Max's parents giving a crap and showing up to the hospital. Now, I can understand that the stepdad wasn't there anymore, that they divorced and he moved, but what about the mom? There's no tie to the Thessal Hydra that was mentioned for pretty much in every season. But certainly he was even on the drawing in season 4 that Will drew, and then no mention of Thessal Hydra. There was no closure for the therapist Kelly, and what happened to her. Number 60, I thought that when Henry died, he just came back to life again, like in season 4. Keep in mind, in season 4, they essentially burned Henry to the ground, and then in another realm and Upside Down, they shot him and they burned him to the ground too. 11 did the exact same thing to him within Dimension X. And in that case, he essentially falls to the ground, and Henry dies a huge wound. But then he just goes to Dimension X and basically morphs into something unbelievably stronger. Why wouldn't that happen this time? Joy hacks his head off, but they're in Dimension X, which means the rules are he can't die. He certainly can't die from an axe, Joyce. I'm sorry, guys, but it's just unbelievably unrealistic. If you want to see bad writing, the last line when Joy's you put the wrong family, I'm like, that is the worst. I cringed. It was the first time that I was like, what are they doing? Then I'm like, that is the worst. You're going to say that that's the line that Joy says, which keep in mind, she drops an F-bomb, which she never did in the series. But Mike, if he were envisioning it, I'm sure that he would envision that in. But after she chops his head off after 5 minutes of battle, Will's coming out scene lasted longer than the Mind Flayer's death. Run that math in your head. So what, Joyce wops his head off. Essentially he doesn't just go back to Dimension X and just morph his head back on. In the D&D game, as just kind of a tidbit, the Thessal Hydra has the ability to grow heads. You hack a head off and it can just regrow one. So even if that was real, which I don't believe that it was, it could just regrow one, right? But there was no closure or relationship to the Thessal Hydra. Where is Jason's parents? there was another one of like Jason died. You never heard an ending to that story of like in the last scene whenever Max is in Hawkins splits into four and Max essentially dies, doesn't die, but goes into the coma, and Jason is just like melted into the ground. You don't see like Jason's parents at graduation being like, "Where's our son?" It's a plot hole, a smaller plot hole, but a plot hole. There's no closure for Dart. There's no circle back to Friends Don't Lie. There's no circle back to Sarah's mom, like essentially who Hopper had the kid with, and then she moves. There's no circle back there. There's no answer for why 11 was different than the other kids. Why were 11 and 8 different? I believe it's because they had Dr. Brenner as a true father. They were the only kids that had Dr. Brenner as a true father. The rest were just infused with Henry's blood. But there was no answer on why 11 and 8 were so specifically different than the other kids. How did 8 get out? There was no answer for that. There was no character arc for Dr. Akers, who was kind of coming around. He didn't like Dr. K in the end because she was being kind of controlling and yelling at him. And he was like, don't involve her. Don't let her come in because she's becoming a pain in my butt. There was no character arc from him. I thought he might break good, but then there was no character arc. Essentially, he just got killed by 11 and that was it. There was no explanation. Oh, here's the biggest one. Here, not the biggest one, but a big one. Number 70, there is no explanation ever in the series or allusion or anything of what Stranger Things means. What does it mean? There is no answer as is for what does it mean as a series. What does Stranger Things means? What's strange? What's stranger? Why did they call it that? With this, I believe I for sure know that. If you want to see that, you can go to the episode 4 of this and 3. But there's no answer of what Stranger Things means with this, Truman Show ending as it is. There's no re-mention of Hopper's wife. There's no re-mention of what happened to Lonnie. After Steve Harrington's parents, you see an allusion in the playbill in The Dream with Max. You see Steve Harrington's father say, not a chance, Joyce, or something like that. And she's like, whatever, Harrington. So that was the only mention of Steve Harrington's father, but you never see any closure on that or mention of him again. None of Nancy's dreams. Here's another big one. None of Nancy's dreams, whenever Vecna essentially took her to a trance, none of those came true. So I can understand one not coming full circle, but her parents don't die. She says specifically the monsters were in Hawkins, but I'm not talking this was our Hawkins. And yes, you had one scene where there were some Demogorgons at the military base. No, I think that was in the Upside Down. You didn't see Demogorgons, a troop of them in Hawkins, which is one of the dreams that Nancy had. So none of those visions that Vecna said came full circle. Do the caves still exist? You don't know if that didn't come full circle. Why was there water in Max's dream? So that's a plot hole of why was there water whenever Max went into a trance? There is no water in the Upside Down. So why was there water? She specifically stepped on water and was surprised by it. Another one is why was there water, quote unquote, in the ups? What they were showing you whenever they peed on that wall was a reminder that there is no water in the Upside Down. Like you never see water when you go in there. Even the pool, whenever Barb in season 1, I think it's the end of episode 1 and beginning of episode 2, is in a pool, a whole freaking pool of water. When she gets stuck to the Upside Down, the pool is empty because there's no water in the Upside Down. But then magically in the Upside Down, 11 goes into a tank of water. It's all pointing to basically the same thing. There's no full circle on the theme of that you need to be talking, which is I thought was going to be a positive hive mind. There's no full circle on the theme of not judging one another or giving people the benefit of the doubt. There's no full circle on several times that the main characters call the other main characters horrible names. There's no full circle on that and having to say you're sorry to basically mend the bond, which I think is the theme of the show. So you see 11 calls Hopper, she's like, you're just like Papa, which is one of his biggest nightmares. You see Lucas call 11 a traitor. You see Mike. I honestly think that our response to episode 8 is verbatim the response, which is funny because we judge it. In season 1, when there's a fake death of Will, you see Mike react. All of them react. And Mike all of a sudden turns on 11 and he's like, why would you say that Will's still alive when he's not still alive? And she just looks like frantic because she's like, she was in the middle of showing them Will's house of where Will currently was in the Upside Down. And then the fake death happens. Lucas loses his mind. Mike loses his mind. And he said, "What'd you do?" Which oddly enough, 11 said to Hopper after he shot the tank, which I don't think was real, but anywho, I digress. She's like, "What did you do?" But Mike blows up and he's like, "Why would you do that to us? Why would you tell us he's still alive when he's dead?" And he's unbelievably horrible to her. I think that that's mirrored to our response right now. We're being horrible to the Duffer Brothers and all these main characters. They gave a ton of interviews all the way through volume 1 and then silence afterwards. They gave a couple of Jimmy Fallon interviews, but Jimmy Fallon would not even mention Conformity Gate, even though it was a massive viral theory at the point, because it's all because of what's going to happen tonight. And we are being horrible in the midst of thinking that they're not giving us exactly what we want or giving us a meaningful ending. We are turning on them and calling them these disgusting names, just like Mike did to 11. So I think it's a mirror, it's showing us exactly who we are. But there was no full circle about saying you're sorry or name calling whenever you weren't essentially getting what you want. Number 83, why weren't Derek's parents ever released? The Turnbows were Steve and Will and Joyce and Robin and Erica locked up the Turnbows and then took Derek and then just left the parents there. I'm like, I hope they had food and water. I hope that they drank a lot of water at dinner, even though I think they were drinking wine. But there's a plot hole. Number 84, what happened to Holly's necklace? It was ripped off very strikingly, which had her charm of she would be Holly the heroic whenever that charm was on. It was ripped off and you never see or hear of it again. There was no full circle on that. Number 85, what ending on an open... Okay, now we're going to transition. I'm going to rapid fire these last ones. These aren't plot holes, but I'm like, these are the ones where I was like, really? Really, this is what we're doing? Again, I believed it for about 30 seconds that I was just in shock. And then I was like, there has to be something. I was like sad for days that I was like, it wasn't about the series. It was about what the series meant to me, not to me, but like what the meaning of it was. And that all of that was robbed all of the sudden when I knew how much meaning, and the message that it's portraying is an unbelievably precious message and a rare message. And I was so sad that wasn't conveyed at the end. And then, so I like several of these thoughts entered my head. And then after I realized, like, once Conformity Gate, so I'm like, never mind. Okay, back on. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that was not like, I couldn't believe it like I was pissed. I couldn't believe that's just not the Duffer Brothers. It's not who they are. It's not what the show was. So anywho, these are WTF moments. I'm like, okay, number 1, we're ending on an open, or 85. We're ending on an open to interpretation for real. It's like the most predictable ending ever of like, is 11 alive? Is she not alive? I'm like, come on, guys. They were trying to give you like something to bite your teeth into with this fake ending, but I'm like, there is no way that is the main question that is left open. That like, it's very Inception-y. I think it was a head nod to Inception, but it certainly can't be the main thing that was open to interpretation. 86, nobody major died, which means there's no consequences for anything. You cannot end a series without someone major dying. It means that everything essentially meant nothing because everyone got away with it. That is a consequence, that it turns the story into something meaningful. So a great example of this is Hunger Games. Someone asked me at the end, they're like, why'd Prim have to die? I'm like, Prim had to die. She had to. First of all, it showed you that Katniss, she lost sight of the thing that originally got her into the games, which was Prim. But that turned it meaningful, very, very meaningful for her. In those last scenes where she's like, she's gone. She screamed to the cat, she's gone. So nobody major died in this. Nobody major. They introduced characters along the way. They killed off Eddie. They killed off Chrissy. They killed off Billy, but there was, nobody major, and the major cast died, which they had an interview where they said someone was. Here's another, nobody really had a major character arc. Even Steve, who started as like kind of this F-boy, that was Mr. Popular and had an incredible character arc the entire season. The last scene is it ended on him essentially still, sleeping with a lot of women and not settling down. That's the last thing that you're going to say is basically that. So there was no major character arc for anyone really involved. The first 50, number 88, the first 50 minutes of episode 8 was an opener leading up. And number 89, the last 50 minutes was closure and epilogue. Um, I saw at the point twice in the movie theaters. At the point where the battle was over, I checked my clock and I was like, okay, no way back. This can't be the end because there's 50 minutes left. That's the rules of cinema. And I saw several other people in especially in the first audience, because I could tell they know cinema, because they had, gotten online within hours to get a ticket to that sold out, it sold out within 45 minutes to that theater. Everyone was checking their clock and they're like, oh, never mind. It can't be over because that's the rules of cinema. You can't do 50 minutes of epilogue. They did 50 minutes over, 50 minutes of epilogue, and then a few minutes of battle. So it just can't happen. Number 90, they killed 11 twice in cinema and in literature. You cannot kill a character twice. You can't take a character away from someone twice. So, like Hopper was safe. 11 had to be safe. Because anytime that someone's killed off, which they killed her off in season 1, you cannot kill someone off twice, which they essentially did. And the last couple ones here, 91, she went through all of that journey to sacrifice herself again. Number 92, the Mind Flayer was beat with a couple of water balloons with gasoline in them. Number 93, they straddled involving the play and not involving the play, which is very unlike them as writers. They're usually all in or all out. They said in an interview that this episode was all in. So it doesn't make sense that they half involved the first shadows of play and not all the way. Number 95, nothing happened essentially to the story from the story perspective. Nothing happened or progressed or was new in season 5 that wasn't in the other seasons. Number 6, the clues that were circled from other seasons. There was 200 clues that were left open, Back to the Future being one of them, that were not capitalized in season 5. That all of those were left open. Again, it's not that it couldn't be done. It's just unlike the Duffer Brothers to do that. When they leave an Easter egg, you have to keep in mind how they show their audience that they love them is they leave Easter eggs if you research hard enough. The more you research, the bigger ones that you find. That's the fun of the Duffer Brothers. That's the fun of the whole part of the fun of the whole season. It's why there's been viral adoption and visceral reaction, is because people are so invested, right? Because they research so much, because they know when they do, they get a clue, they get something tangible on the back end. So it's unlike them to just give all these Easter eggs and then not turn it into anything into them of meaning. And then number 97, and then we're going to transition on the second bucket. Number 97, and the last one in this bucket, Purple Rain. Really, that's the song that we're going to leave it on. I was a shock when you have Mike making out with 11 as the final scene to Purple Rain. I'm sorry, y'all. I love music and I love this series. I couldn't stop laughing. And I'm like, what is happening to this dumpster fire? What is getting worse somehow? I had a friend fly in from Maine to come watch this with me. You know who you are. I had a friend fly in from Maine, which was unbelievably meaningful for me. But the rules were, my friend said, because they knew how much this series meant to me, I said, I have 2 sets of tickets. And they said, why don't you go to the first one first by yourself? And I said to them 3 separate times, I was like, thanks for letting me have that. Of like, that they've watched the series a lot. Probably not as, I don't think the Duffer Brothers watched as heavily as me. And they were like, why don't you watch it first? So I watched it. And then I leave the theater and I feel like I had just gotten shot in the face. And they were meeting me outside in the movie because we had to drive directly to the second theater. But the rules were I could only talk about the French Revolution, so that I wouldn't talk about basically how it ended, and when we were driving there, I was like, I don't even know, I don't know how to fake how upset, gutted I am right now. Of like, I'm supposed to not tell you spoilers from this thing, but I was so wrecked. And when I'm looking at my friend as the mess pans out in the second movie, I'm just watching their face go from I'm so excited to what the crap is this, and the finale being a Purple Rain of them kissing was just ridiculous. Okay, So let's go back to AE and SDR for 10 minutes, and then we're going to finish off with all the clues. And then I'm going to if you are still watching, I'm hoping that I'm just on in the background, and that you're like doing your thing. I mean, this is obviously the longest episode that I have done, on this, but it is hypothetically finale, unless there's an episode tonight. And then I'm going to do a big fat I told you so series on not I told you so, but I am so glad that there was an ending. So, okay, we're going to go back to, and we're going to do 11 things rapid fire that AE leaders and SDR leaders aren't doing that they should be, essentially. Strangely aren't doing, but they should be. Okay, AEs, let's start with them. So the things that you should be looking for. This is for AE leaders from a tactical perspective, things that you should be looking for on your reps calls. That I believe that most AE leaders aren't, as evidence that it was a strong call. So the first one is a summary of the call. So usually, especially within recording software, on the left-hand side, you'll see a summary of the call. And I would take a look at that summary and look at one data point. How much of that summary is talking about you as a company? And how much of that summary is talking about you as a company? And how much of that summary is talking about the prospect, meaning it's reviewing points about their circumstance, their setup, their business problems, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the first thing I don't see most leaders take a look at, but that gives you in a quip what AI thinks the call was about. So is that call, by and large, what is the percentage split of how much is about your company? It should be close to zero in a discovery call. I don't think that you should demo within the first call. I don't believe in discovery. I think that it should be completely about discovery for the first call, meaning you're discovering things that they don't know that would hurt them. So that is something that can give you a good clue on how much was about them versus how much was about you as a company. Number two, the second thing that I would look for that most AE leaders aren't is every single time that the prospect talked. I see a lot of people look at talk time as suggested, but every single time that the prospect talks, I would look to right after that, does the AE ask a question or do they talk about something? It's close to irrelevant whatever they were talking about, whether they were talking about, yeah, we do that, or this is how we cover that, or giving a case study or whatever. It's not relevant, in my opinion, that much relevant about what they were talking about. It's more relevant is, are they talking? Are they asking a question or are they talking? When the prospect says something, I believe we should ask a question, no matter what they say in discovery. If they say something or they ask a question, we still, in both case scenarios, we should ask a question. They say, man, we've had a ton of churn recently, so I wanted to see what y'all could do about that. Mike, a ton of churn, what do you mean by that? Would be a question that I would ask of, like, do you mean percentage wise? How many people? What do you mean by recently? Like, there's a lot of pieces that I need to know in there, but all of discovery should be about discovering. So I would go to the end of the clip for the call that is in front of you, whenever you're viewing them for the reps, and go to the end when the prospect talked. And if depending on the length, I would listen to what the prospect said in there, so you can generate what questions you think should have been asked. But I would look at the data point of, after they talked, what did the rep do next? Did they ask a question or did they just start talking about something? The third one, if they defined a subjective answer. So when the prospect uses subjective terms, we have low, high, recently. We've had a good amount of adoption. We've typically had a lot of server uptime, and we've only had a couple of bouts of server downtime. Over the course of since the last leader has joined. But then recently, we've had significant amounts of all of those terms of significant bouts. A lot recently. I need to know definitions around them. Now, to be clear, I don't think that within discovery, you can't stop the prospect, especially at the beginning. Most people come into a sales call thinking that the rep will know nothing, and that the rep is just at best case scenario trying to get all the things that I know out of me so that they can justify why they should buy and why they should buy for more dollar amount. So at the beginning, I need to teach them, quote unquote, that they they're the ones that should be talking, right? So I don't want to interrupt them, especially at the beginning, because it unteaches that behavior. One thing that I didn't mention of things that reps should do that they aren't doing currently is I would audibly take notes. Don't worry that they can hear the clicking of your computer. Don't worry that you're not looking at them directly in the eye. And even if you have a note taker, the note taker will record what has happened, but it will not record what you think is important or assumptions that you're making off of what they're saying has happened. When someone isn't taking notes, it doesn't show me that they have retention. It calls into question whether they have retention. It shows me that they don't care enough to take those notes. So it drives me nuts when a server comes up and they don't take notes and they essentially do the order from memory. I'm like, I don't care if you can do the order from memory. I care that you get it correct. Right. So something that I would do as a rep is I would take notes, and so you can write down stuff, assumptions or things that they are saying that you need cleared up. But I have two lists within those notes. On the left-hand side, I make an ongoing list. Almost think of it like the numbers in the NASDAQ of they're just ongoing as the prospect's talking. I have a list on the left of things that they said that I need further definition on. If they said I have low, I have good, we've had a problem with blank, then I'm like, what do they mean by blank? And then on the right-hand side, I have a running list of questions that I need to ask them. So again, I can't interrupt them when they say something. It's not like I interrupt them every 10 seconds and say, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? Can you define that? But I'm making lists of all of those things. And when they give that gap, if they give a hiccup and they stop talking, I then, take a look at my list. And the good thing is it kind of buys you some time when you're taking notes when that happens. And then you can look over to your right-hand side and say, out of these questions, which one is the most important that I need to ask? So I would make a list of both of those. But the point is if I'm an AE leader, I would look through their calls. And whenever the prospect gives over those subjective data points, I would ask myself the question after I view the call of, did the AE double back and see if that was what the definition of that was. Okay, next one. Sorry, my computer currently logged me out. Okay, I'm going to go over to my notes here. So I would think about from the AE perspective, definitely taking notes on the interim. Okay, the next one, if and when the prospect mentions a problem, did the AE essentially double down on the problem? So anytime I put a rule on Discovery that anytime all of my lists are now gone, but I have them in my notes section. Anytime that a prospect mentions that they have a problem or a struggle, I have to double down. So I look for the data point of when the prospect said we've had a lot of struggle with, especially near the beginning of the call, they're usually going to lead with a driving impact if it's geared correctly. If someone says, why'd you give me the time today? Then they'll usually lead with the surface. Well, sometimes you have to dig for it. We've had, a lot of problems with just getting our marketing team and our sales team to communicate. There's been a lot of drop off with some leads. We wanted to see what you can do from an event perspective to streamline that. So that's a problem. Anytime they say struggle, problem, issue, challenge, the thing that I would look for as an AE leader is what did the person essentially do? What did the AE do next? Did they double down on that? Did they ask about that? Of a good catch-all question, you say problem in terms of what do you mean what do you mean by that? Or what do you mean by they're having a lot of problems with struggling to communicate between the two teams? So I'd ask myself the question, how often and did they at all, and what percentage of the time did they double down on a question, essentially double down on something that the prospect mentioned whenever they mentioned a challenge or a struggle? Okay, the next one is that I would ask myself as an AE leader is the volume of questions that the rep asked. This is a huge one, oddly enough. I don't see many recording softwares even measure for this, which is crazy. They measure talk time, but they often don't measure the amount of questions that the rep asked. And labeling these types of questions, were they self-diagnosis questions, were they BANT questions, were they, which is really shocking to me and shows me where we're at from the industry perspective. We don't even think that's important. But I would ask myself, what was the volume of questions that my reps asked on the discovery call? If anything like the reps that I've seen the calls, I've seen I don't even know the number of calls, but I mean, to give you a point of reference, I have 111 plot holes and 111 tips on or reasons that I think there's another episode. I've seen a lot of calls, and the average, I would say, is around three questions that people are asking, which, keep in mind, statistics are very clear. Like, top perform, you won't even get to where you're even marginally good until you're hitting around 8 to 11 questions. Now, it matters what questions they are, and it matters if you do something with it, but I would just look over for their calls. How many questions are they actually asking the prospect? And I would just review the call of, like, I thought it would be harder than it is to be a consultant because I have so many different industries that for the clients I'm selling, of who they're selling into, and so many different buyers. But it's very clear on the call. Prospects are actually much more apparent. They're much more, surface, like, they surface to the top what they're struggling with than we actually think. It's just that we don't go anywhere with it. They're much more obvious than we think, so they'll be like, man, I've had a lot of problems with my, let's go IT. I had a lot of problems with my storage recently, and or let's do another buyer persona. I've had a payments. I've had a lot of problems with my payment timeout rate recently, and people are just churning, so I'm not hitting my transaction success rate. It's like they just leave it there. They're like, awesome, so we sell to that. Or they'll ask another question that's completely irrelevant in that. They're like, hey, can you tell me about this other thing? Where it's like, if they mention an issue or problem, did they double down on that? But I'm asking the question of, like, how many questions did they ask at all? Did they ask anything after that? Of, like, what comes next is always a question. So how often did they ask a question on the call is the next thing that I would be asking. Number 7, the volume of self-diagnosis questions. Self-diagnosis questions is when you essentially you ask a question that's asking for the buyer's or prospect's take and their opinion, and then you're anchoring to that. So the only value to discovery or a seller actually being involved is when they find things that the prospect didn't know. So these questions, and I hear them recommended online, which makes me absolutely nauseous, is questions like, what's the impact to you of not moving forward? What's the ripple effects to your team if you don't buy? What's the root cause? What's the problem you're trying to solve? Now, at the very beginning, you always have to have one self-diagnosis question. I need to understand what's the driving impact of them buying. So I'm like, so I know that you requested a demo and that you downloaded a piece of content. I did a little research on your company. I think I have a general understanding of what you do. What I don't know is why you gave me the time today. So can you, I'm assuming it's another one I use is, I'm assuming you gave me the time today. You look like someone who doesn't waste their time. To hypothetically, you have a problem that you hypothetically might be wanting to solve somewhat soon, or maybe it's now, and hypothetically maybe with us. If you don't mind me asking, what's that problem? So I need that driving impact, that self-diagnosed piece of information right off the bat. The only thing that a prospect can't be wrong about is that they have something that they want to change. They can be wrong about everything else, that it's changeable, how they're going about changing it, what will happen, what's the likelihood it will happen if they don't do anything, what will happen if it does come to fruition. They can be wrong about everything else, what they need to do about it, when they need to do that thing about it, what's the likelihood they're going to be able to solve it if they try. But the thing that they can't be wrong about is a driving impact, that they want something to change. So I do need that self-diagnosis question. But past that, the more self-diagnosis questions you ask, and especially right up front, you have to keep in mind, they think you don't know anything, and they think you're after the information of what they know as a buyer, so that you can justify why they should buy. So I have to find an unknown relatively quickly within that interaction to prove to them that it is worth their time. So self-diagnosis questions, I would look for that as a data point of how many of them are they asking on the call. Number 8, another type of question I'd throw in there is BANT questions. How many other questions out of the ones that they asked are BANT questions? Number 8, I would measure, did they find something the prospect didn't know on the call? Even if they found what they know already, that does not help forecasting. It does not improve the likelihood that they're going to buy. Finding out, forecasting is a whole different topic, but did they find an unknown? Did they find something, a data point, a mention, a reference, an average, a root cause, a tactical problem, an indicator they should look at, an impact, a piece of content? Did they find something on the call that buyer didn't know? If they didn't, you're at huge risk of close lost. Because you should be, honestly, of like, why not buy someone else? At that point, it's like, well, if you don't know how to swing the bat better, then it's like, if you can't teach me how to swing the bat or what pitches I should lay off, if they're too high, if they're too low, then it's like, I'm at high risk of buying why wouldn't they buy any other bat? Or why wouldn't they work with anyone else? Of like, then we're just down to like a pricing game, of like, let's talk about pricing and how cheaply can I get this? Because if I'm going to have to do all the self-diagnosing myself, then I'm going to want to, roll those dice as cheaply as I can. So I'd ask myself, how many did they find an unknown during the call? Number 9, did they find the actual business problem? What I mean by that defined is you can put into your CRM, buyer persona on the call that they have to log that. Then it's like, what's the lagging indicator? And they have to input that. You can do a drop down menu, but that's kind of it's a good way to teach them of like IT director, for instance, but you might do it in the beginning of what do they think that the lagging indicator is. So it teaches them that they have to figure out what that is before the call. But then you should have 2 fields, lagging indicator goal and lagging indicator achievement. So for IT director, what's the server uptime and what's the server uptime goal? If they don't have those, they do not have the business problem. I do not have the business problem. So it's something that I would look for. Something I would bake in my CRM for sure, of like, instead of having an open box where you just have this open narrative of why they're there, it's like, I don't need story time. Thanks, Mike. I don't need story time where they're all vampires and whatever it is. I don't need story time. I need the business problem. Did they get it? Yes or no? And so a quick way to surface that, a quick way to help them understand that they're not getting it, and a quick way to understand that they aren't getting it, what percentage of the time they're not, is just by having those fields of like, what buyer persona was it? And it's like they have a drop down menu for that. And then it's like, what's the lagging indicator? If you want to self fill a sign of like CFO, and then it fills gross profit margin. It's like the open fields of what is the gross profit margin and what is the goal of it, so that you have the overlying business problem. The 10th one is the volume of unknowns that they found, and then the 11th one that you should be looking for as an AE leader that people aren't looking for often is one that, well, 2. What percentage of the time did the prospect self-extend the call? And it's a good indicator that they're getting value. Is did they asked to extend the call? It's a leading indicator that they have gotten value, that they want to spend more time on the call. I cannot tell you the amount of times I should probably look into this, the amount of times that someone has told me they have a hard stop at the half hour, whatever it is. And then at the half hour, I always look at a really encouraging sign. They're like, hey, do you have a couple more minutes, or blah, blah, blah. And it's unbelievable, automatic, or like out of thin air, their 11:30 meeting disappears. Right. So I always take it as, which I completely understand why they're doing it. They're like, I want to save my time on this, that they're like, I want to save my time. I don't want to spend any more time with this rep than I have to. And then when they get value, they're like, hey, do you have, some extra minutes? Because, and their 11:30 that they had to attend all of a sudden just drops off or cancels, or they have to message someone about it, because all of a sudden the goal is that it's worth it for them. They all of a sudden, they want to prioritize it because it is valuable to them. So I would look at that percentage of the time, of what percent of the time do people say that. And then the 11th one, or 11.5, is how many objections did they get, and what point in the call did they get them, right? So an objection, I do not believe is a good sign. I believe it's a sign that you're trying to sell and that they notice that. So how often did they get that? Specifically, the one that's a deal killer most often is, let me think about it. So the percentage of calls that the prospect said, let me think about it, anywhere in the call, but certainly near the end, is one to look at. Okay, so let's transition to SDRs, and we're going to close out with the pieces of data you should be looking at of why there is another episode coming in a couple hours. So for SDRs, one of the things that I would look at is what time of day did they call, and what day of the week did they call when reps were making their cold calls. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in the morning is when reps are making the majority of their cold calls, and it's the worst time to make their calls. Later throughout the day and later throughout the week is going to be when the best hit times for email and for cold call. So I would be spending all my Mondays on internal stuff, internal meetings, one-on-ones, blah, 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 specific. And you can even spend your time crafting and personalizing and writing the emails, but just delay them to be sent on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday afternoon. So the first thing that I would look at is what time of day did they call, and what days were they actually calling. The second thing that I would look at is activity volume. It's surprising that I'm putting that as number 2, but most people, even though they know it's important, don't realize how little or how many people are sending. anything over 50 emails a day is killing you in terms of email deliverability. So I would just take a look at how many points of outreach are they sending and when, and especially if there is a cadence of they're sending them every 5 minutes, for instance, or they're batching them all at once. Both of those will hurt you for deliverability. So even if they're sending 30 emails, but they're sending them all at once, or they're sending them equidistant from each other, 110, 120, 130, 140, 150, so on and so forth, eventually it will be read as a trigger, essentially, as from an email deliverability perspective. What internet service providers are trying to do is trying to protect inbox experience away from not only bots, but mass blast of people who don't know them. So they study all day long the traits and behaviors of mass blasters and people who are sending cold emails. So that includes vocabulary, and that includes words, and that includes, like problem, solution, increase, decrease, click here, free, trial, 100%. All are trigger words of, I don't want to deliver this. But they're also looking for patterns of when things are sent. So I would take a look into that. The third one is subject lines. Are they different from one another? If there's a rep that sends 2 emails that have the same subject line, it's a deliverability trigger. Why would you send 2 subject lines if they are personalized or internally that have the same, or 2 emails that have the same subject line? Even if they're to different companies, even if it's different reps doing it, you have to keep in mind you're markered as a domain, essentially. So if you have templates or cadences all with the same subject line, then it's even if it's you have like 5 templates and all 5 of those have a different subject line, if each email is sent doesn't have a different subject line, then it's going to hurt you from a deliverability view. So that's something that I would look at. The fourth I would look at is how much personalization was used. And what I mean by personalization is true personalization. The reason I say to look at this is mostly, which I understand, it's a lot of emails that are sent. A habit that I would think about is put 15 minutes in your calendar at the beginning of every single day just to review the emails that were sent out the day before. Shocking. You'll see all kinds of stuff in there, and you'll learn all kinds of stuff in there. And this is all leaders. This is, myself included. So I would look at from the subject line view of like, it'll help you understand, did they send the same subject lines? But it'll also help you understand, did they personalize? They can only differ each one of them. No one, unless they came up with gimmick after gimmick after gimmick, you can only differ the subject lines if every single email is somewhat different. So I'm not saying personalize the entire thing. I'm saying the first line for sure should be personalized, and the second part of the first part of the second line should be tied into essentially your value prop. So I look for, what are they personalizing on? What is it? Is it true personalization? Is it just we went to the same school? Is it just, I have a lot of different buckets of this. If you go to flipthescript.com and click on written and hit the personalization bucket, 6 personalization buckets, I go into them more. But the latter buckets on the right, mutual contacts, for instance, or even company triggers of like company funding, or junk drawer premises of like their hobbies or their interests or their social causes, etc. They're technically personalization, but you have lower efficacy rates on those buckets over on the right. So I would look at, are they personalizing, and what are they personalizing on? Is it too long? Is it too short, etc. Number 5, I look at the true open rates. The reason I say true open rates is if you're using sales engagement and you are taking, even at the top, I would not trust the data, is the punchline. Especially if you're doing a summary of like, here was my open rate over the last 6 months. Or even if you're looking at the summary at the top of a cadence or the top of a sequence or the top of a campaign, so to speak, whatever word for whatever provider, essentially, here's why. What they're doing a lot of times is whenever you make a cold call, you have to log a disposition for the call. And the disposition can be like, call left a voicemail, call connected with voice, the decision maker, whatever it is. And then you have some custom ones. Usually the rep is going to default to the easiest, like road of access, like called no contact or called didn't pick up, which is one issue. But the second issue is just to get through this step, they have to log one. So even if they didn't make a call, they can log one of those. But the third thing is they take a lot of sales engagement providers when they say called left a voicemail or called connected or called whatever, they're going to count that as an opened and as a reply. So it falsely inflates your open rates for your campaign at the header level of like, oh, my open rate was, I've seen as much as triple. Usually it's around double of what the true open rate is for the campaign. So I would look at the cadence or the sequence, and I would simply go through the emails. And when you add them up, you're like, the email 1, what was the open rate, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then divide them by 5. It's usually around under half of what it's represented at the top. And the same for reply rate. So industry average open rate is 15 to 25%. Anything less than 50%, you have a deliverability problem. So I'd look into that. DKIM, DMARC, SPF, custom tracking links. Do you have that set up? But I would look at the true open rate and the true reply rate to understand. And I mean, when you start digging into these cadences, you'll see a lot of, one of the nightmares that I've seen people, a lot of SDR leaders not be able to figure out what's going on, but this is what's happening is KPI reps with, hey, you need to put a certain amount of contacts into this campaign or cadence. And they put them into the cadence. And I've seen people say like, this cadence isn't working. And I'm like, okay, well, double click on it. And they're like, we KPI'd people with putting people in the cadence. And I'm like, okay, so double click into it. And I look into it and I'm like, okay, well, you're right. There are 1,000 people in this cadence. I forgot to say they have to send email 1. So like 30 of the, all of the prospects were basically in the first step, but they hadn't actually sent the first email. Right. So I would just take a look into your campaigns to see the activity. What are the most commonly used campaigns? What are the commonly used cadences? I would add up and physically, manually multiply, add, divide for the open rate and the reply rate to get to know the cadences. And you will truly be shocked in terms of what's really going on, what are reps doing and what are reps not doing, how much are they changing and not changing. Number 7, I would look at go styles. So how you can do this is sorry, SDRs, they're going to hate me for this. A lot of times when you put an activity metric in, people start to go style. So how you can guard against that. And, sometimes I'm going to give people the benefit of the doubt. Usually when I've seen it in the past, I'll bring people in a room. I'll say, okay, I'm going to be short about this. I looked at a report. People are ghost styling. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to do everyone a big fat favor and I'm going to forget that it happened. I'm not even going to get mad about it. What I am going to do is I'm going to be checking this from every day on the way out. So I suggest you get your morals and manners together and do what you have to do. But how you can guard against it is basically create a report on dials that were made that lasted under 3 seconds. So, I mean, even if you just had the last, they dialed and it went to voicemail, if you want to include reps that left to voicemail, it should be dials that lasted less than 30 seconds. So you cannot get through a dial and a full length voicemail in under 30 seconds. You want to be super safe, I would say under 20, that lasted under 20. But you're going to catch people in both group of where they call and they just hang up and it technically counts as a dial. So if you want to do a massive ghost dial, it's under 3. If you want to catch people, look for how often people are leaving voicemails and not leaving voicemails. I look at for the call. I wouldn't really pay attention to the dispositions because again, they're going to, and this isn't a bad thing. A lot of times they're going to default to the least course of effort for the least course of time. It's just the first thing that they have to plug in, and people don't do anything with the data anyway. Typically speaking, I've never seen a department who does and analyzes things based on the disposition the rep put in, especially even for campaign of efficacy, because it has to be based on a rep logging that a meeting was successfully booked, which you introduce rep error, which you introduce muddy data. Muddy data is no data. But I would look at how many calls lasted less than 3 seconds and lasted less than 20 seconds as a data point. Okay, deliverability triggers is the 8th thing I would look at. I would look at how many emails are being sent per day? Are there 50 or more is a deliverability trigger? I would look at, do you have a custom tracking link set up, DKIM setup, SPF setup, DMARC setup? Those are all from the technical end. About half of deliverability is down to the technical setup. About half of deliverability is down to the traits. So those are around the setups. You can talk to ops providers or you can look online about it. I would look at how many links are included in their emails, especially in subject lines. If there's like, a link to your website, a link to their phone number, a link to a piece of content. Every time you introduce a link, you increase the likelihood that email's not going to be delivered, for a lot of reasons, but mainly because they don't want them leaving the house, so to speak. The internet, the inbox provider doesn't want it to lead them somewhere else. If it does, some sites make them more nervous than others and increase the odds of deliverability issues. But the reality is they don't want it linking to somewhere because they don't know the efficacy of where it's linking them, right? And who they're going to associate that with is the provider that's in front of them. So I would look at, links and how many of them are they including. I would try to get that down to 0, at most 1 that's a piece of content. If you're going to include one, I would look at common words. I put a list of words online, but words like problem, free, solution, home, increase, decrease, click here, 100% discount, any kind of numbers. Those are all going to trigger deliverability issues. Even the word spam is a huge spam word. So I look through the emails, not only the subject lines, but the email themselves, and see if those are included. I would see what time they're sending them out. Are they batching them out all at once or equidistant? Are the subject line the same? Any red font's going to kill you. Any images over 4 is going to kill you. I would look at the unsubscribe rates are going to hurt you. Anytime someone unsubscribes, you can't tell this data point, but just so you have it in the back of your head, anytime someone deletes before opening, it's going to double hurt you. Anytime they move you to a contact, forward, or reply, or change you from folder to folder, that's going to help your deliverability. So I'd keep that in your mind, but I look through all of those different features to see essentially what's going on from the deliverability. And plus, you can look up tests online for free to look at the domain health that you have from a sending perspective to see if you're in the clear or not. Okay. The 9th thing I look at is data hygiene triggers. So I would look at the amount of bounces and the amount of unsubscribes. I would also keep in mind that there's a data decay percentage of 3.6% every single month if you are doing things to counter it. There's a number of different things that you can do to counter data enrichment, having people re-enter or re-verify their email every single time that they, or maybe once every, so many times that they download a piece of content, just so you can re-verify their email address. 75% of people during COVID thought about leaving their job or actively did. So just something to keep in, that was just during COVID alone. So I would just think about the more hard bounces that you have hard bounces and soft bounces. Hard bounces are you had the wrong email address. Or it's not connected anymore. Soft bounces, which really hurt you. Soft bounces are maybe a server was down, for instance. So they are different categorically, but I would look at it through your data hygiene. How many duplicates do you have within your system? Just because it can gobble up rep time, number 1, make them not even call on lists, number 2, and spend most of their time having to deal with data as opposed to having to deal with the actual outreach. So I would say about half of the battle from a time perspective usually is just getting a list of people within the right accounts that they're calling on with the right title that they need to reach out to. Then it's, or 50% or 25% of it is that. And then the other 25% is getting an accurate email address and an accurate phone number that's a direct dial. Once you have that, it's a much easier battle. So I would look into what percentage of the time do you have phone trees? What percentage of the time is there even an email or even a phone number attached? What percentage of the time do they have email address or bounce rate or hard bounce rate or unsubscribes? I would look into all of that to look into the data hygiene of how much of your time from your rep's perspective and how it's affecting your deliverability is spent on bad data. So bad data and bad deliverability or email deliverability are 2 huge triggers that people aren't thinking about. And the 11th one I would look at is, or 10th and 11th, is I would look at for the email sequence and cadence, what email, how many people did they reach out to for email 1, for email 2, 3, 4, and 5. A secret one that people don't know a lot of, that people don't hear a lot about, is essentially if someone doesn't respond, or if someone responds, or it's a hard bounce, they're removed from the campaign. But as I look through cadences, reps typically are only going to do email 1 and 2, and then they're going to completely drop off. When the breakup email, at least for my campaigns, are for sure the most successful. Usually the least sent are going to be around emails 3 and 4 in there, quote unquote, the least responded to. However, the last email, certainly for my campaigns, are the most decision makers and the most heavily responded to and the most meetings booked. And so if you're gearing it the right way, I would be less aggressive near the beginning and more aggressive near the end of the campaign is where you're going to see the most results and the highest results in terms of their level of decision-making power. So I would look at how often are reps tailing off from there and just not sending basically what they're instructed to send. Another thing that I look at within campaigns is how much are they erasing of the email that you said to send. So a lot of the people are just going to, erase stuff, especially if it's a personalization trigger that you have to include. They're going to erase that and just so they can save time. So it's something that I would look at is what percentage of the email are they actually sending over. And then the last one that I would look at that people typically aren't looking at is for the calls that are connected. Typically for connect rates, they're really bad, but I'm just going to tell you what they are. They're usually about 10%. So the average cold caller, if it's a normal full-time cold caller, is going to make 40 dials a day. That's going to yield 4 connects. If you call on Friday afternoon, especially, or Wednesday, Thursday afternoon, you're going to greatly exacerbate your connect rate. But I would look at for the connects that did actually happen. I would listen to the first part of that call to understand, did they use personalization and not? But I would also analyze at what point did they lose the person? So was it within the first 15 seconds? Was it at I would just listen to the progression of the call and see at what point of the call, quote unquote, script or structure did they actually lose someone? And then the last bonus one, and then we're going to finish off with the Stranger Things. The last bonus one that I would look at is what time of day are they setting meetings for prospects? Are they setting them in the morning, in the afternoon? Are they setting, and what day of the week are they setting them? Friday is going to be the worst in terms of the meeting actually holds. You're going to get double the no-shows over call that you do over email because a lot of times it's a false objection. So around 35% is normal for cold calls, but within the afternoon is going to be much better than the morning. So I would look at what time of day are they actually scheduling the calls? Are they scheduling the calls in the bright and early 8 a.m. on Monday morning, or 9 a.m. in the morning on Tuesday? Because you can expect a significant increase in people who will no-show if they're doing it in the morning versus the afternoon. Okay, that is section 5. We're going to finish off with, we're already in this thing. We've been going for a couple hours now. So we're going to finish off with all of the meaty Stranger Things points, all of the meaty reasons that I believe for sure there is something that's going to happen in the episode. There is an episode 9 coming, or the documentary tonight is going to be all episode 9. I know that I'm putting myself out there for this, but I figured might as well. I believe for sure there is another episode. I'm going to be genuinely shocked if there's not a significant portion of tonight of I think they're going to mirror it off of the Freddy Krueger, essentially it looks like a documentary, but it isn't. They're breaking the fourth wall and they're making the last episode relevant to us. But I'm going to rapid fire the data points that make me think that most of these are not online. There are a certain number that are online. But most of these I have not seen in the videos that are online. Okay, number 1, all the scripts are in white. So when the Duffer Brothers release a picture basically of the finale, the actual script of the finale when people were reading it, and it was in red on red paper so that you can't photocopy it. And in all the behind the scenes looks that we've seen for the episode 8, they were on white. So there is the first sign. Number 2, how the ticket was sold. So the ticket to go to the movie theaters for Stranger Things was essentially sold as a voucher, but it wasn't sold as a full ticket. I noticed that, but I didn't know why. And it's because from a legal perspective, if they sell a ticket that's to a finale, but it's not the actual finale, people could sue them. So that's your second clue that this isn't the actual finale. The third is there was an interview with the Duffer Brothers where they essentially, they slip. And it's funny because Matt is staring at Ross as he basically, he goes a little bit too far with it. But the interviewer asked him about basically how the monsters or the villain has been getting progressively worse and how they've been playing a lot with dreams. And so Ross basically goes off on a tangent. He said, yes, well, we love the idea of dreams and kind of the dream world. And he makes basically a reference to someone that they were looking at that does a lot of work within Dream. I think his name was Taram Singh. But The Cell is basically the movie that he wrote. But essentially, and that movie is going into you are going into the mind of basically a killer within their dream world to find out different data points. And so he said it's very interesting to go into the mind of a sociopath or the mind of so that you can find information. So, and he verbatim says, we played around with this idea of what happens when you build or construct a reality that looks cozy and looks real, but there's something that's just off, is what he says. He says there's something that's just off. And a lot of times that can be nightmarish in and of itself, even more nightmarish than a CGI monster. And I'm like, there is a smoking gun. And he says that that's what season 5 is. He said, we try to go all in with this theme. And that's how we tried to go all in on this scenario, essentially. So to me, that's a smoking gun, that somehow they were supposed to be playing with dreams and a reality that looks good and looks quote unquote cozy, but there's something that's just quote unquote off, which was the main feeling that I had whenever I left the theaters of Stranger Things, was there was something that was just off whenever they were, the characters were talking, that I was like, it didn't feel like it was Stranger Things, and it didn't feel like it was the end. So that is the next data point. Sorry, I'm playing along with the camera. I'm trying to get Stranger Things on our record here, but it looks like it's not going. Okay, here's another one. If you look in the epilogue, whenever Jonathan is videotaping Jonathan and Steve are dressing like they never did before. There's a lot of people that aren't dressing like they ever did before, but Jonathan is wearing a suit for the first time, and he is videotaping the graduation. And in all the videotapes in previous seasons, when someone's videotaping something, for instance, when Will was videotaping the night that he trick-or-treated, and when 11 was being videotaped on the rink in season 4, when she was skating on the rink, whenever Angela poured milkshake all over her, there's a date and there's a time at the bottom of the video. And the one, and it feels like a smoking gun to me. And the one in when Jonathan is videotaping the graduation, no date, no time. Why? Because if we were in Dimension X, and we were in a trans, if it truly Mike's in a trans, which I forgot to say is the theory. That's what the theory is behind episode 8, is that we're in a trans, either in Mike's head or either Mike's in a trans or Will's in a trans. I believe it's definitely Mike. That Vecna is put in a trans, that if we were in a trans, then we essentially would be in Dimension X, where there is no time. So the video not having a date and a time completely makes sense in that case scenario. Number 5, in the Will's coming out scene, which I know is very controversial, but in Will's coming out scene, when everyone was hugging, they have digital watches and none of them have a time on it. Why? Because if we were in Dimension X, any scene that Mike is in is high candidate for it's not real. They're in a dream. He's in a trans. And when this probably happened was the end of episode 4, essentially, whenever he envisioned Vecna coming through the upside down. So that is another smoking gun, in my opinion, of none of the watches in Will's coming out scene, which Mike was sitting there, essentially had a time. Number 6, the fourth wall was broken. So what the fourth wall is, for anyone who doesn't know, is essentially in cinema, and it's not done that often in cinema, where they are recognizing that the audience is watching, and they're talking to the audience, and they're making references to the audience as if you're there. So a great example of this is in The Office. Jim is constantly doing this. If he looks at the camera, because he's looking at the audience, essentially. The first time that they did this was in season 5, is when they broke the fourth wall, and they broke it very heavily. So Lucas, when he says there are no coincidences, he's looking straight at the camera. This is the first time in Stranger Things history where they were looking at the camera. Henry looked at the camera when he was looking at the kids. During the graduation, when Mike and his mom, Mrs. Wheeler, are hugging, they're looking straight at the camera. Hopper, when he's saying lines to Mike in the epilogue, is looking straight at the camera. The girls that are around the girl, Susie, or not Susie, what's her name, that comes up to Dustin and says, like, hey, you should come to our party. Her friends around her are looking straight at the camera. Everyone in the audience of the graduation is looking straight at the camera. So the fourth wall has been broken. That's very clear. And so what that means essentially is they are talking to and alluding to and engaging the audience basically in the narrative at this point. Again, I believe that's because we have become the point. We've become an example that we are the monster, but it's just something to take notice of. The Godfather reference. So number 7 in the epilogue, whenever they are taking graduation pictures of Will with Hopper and with Joyce, one of the curtains falls down and the sun starts to come in, which is also a clue that it's not real, because in season 2, whenever Elle moved in there, they basically they didn't have sheets hanging there. They had long-term things, blinds that you pulled down, because she always had to keep the blinds up. So there was a catch from a consistency point of view. But also Hopper says, this isn't The Godfather. And The Godfather, the ending movie wasn't in all wasn't the ending that people thought, was not the ending movie that people thought. So that was another reference. Number 8, here is a huge one. So every single time a character is playing a video game, usually in Stranger Things, it's because that's the theme of the season. So a great example of this is Mad Max. Whenever she starts to play Dig Dug in season 2, it's because she's dig-dugging tunnels underneath the ground, or the earth. And in season 2 is when Will is with his mind, we find out in season 5, digging tunnels underneath Hawkins for the Upside Down to exist. So the game that's being played in season 5 by Derek essentially is a game called Ghosts and Goblins. And listen to this. At the end of Ghosts and Goblins, when you win and you become essentially the boss, it tells you that you are under a spell and that the entire thing was an illusion, and that you have to go back to square one, and that you have to win again, because the whole first battle was not the last battle. I don't know how much more clear you can get. And it's very prominent that they show you that it's Ghosts and Goblins. And that's the ending of Ghosts and Goblins, is it wasn't actually real. So there's another clue. Number 9, Jimmy Fallon, and we already covered this one, but when he's given interviews to Stranger Things characters basically since the series has existed. I think Millie Bobby Brown has been on 11 different times. And he gave the characters all interviews. And in all the ones recently where Conformity Gate was going wild, huge theory, going off the chain, everyone's talking about it. Like, you have to keep in mind, within the first 5 days of Volume 1 being released, this is Netflix's biggest series of all time. Within the first 5 days, first of all, it crashed Netflix. Both volumes being released crashed Netflix. Even Conformity Gate was supposed to happen, meaning the 9th episode was supposed to be released on January 7th. That crashed Netflix. So 59.6 million unique viewers tuned into Stranger Things for the Volume 1 within the first 5 days alone, okay? Conformity Gate is the most viral movie series, or movie theory, I would say, of all time. I haven't run the numbers, but I would say for sure it is gripping the globe, right? And you're telling me that you have main characters, Max, go on Jimmy Fallon, and he makes allusions to it, just like the Duffer Brothers poke fun of Mac, or fun of Steve being killed off by almost killing him off and not killing him off. Jimmy Fallon goes, okay, so there's been a lot of theories and there's been a lot of talk about this. And you see Max's face go white. She's like, wait, I thought he wasn't allowed to bring this up. And then he's like, so let's talk about 11. Do you think 11's still alive? And then she looks so relieved. He does that in several different interviews where he does not bring up Conformity Gate, which is the most relevant thing that's going on in the interview, but he always makes allusions to, there's a lot of rumors going on. I want to know, do you think that X, Y, and Z? And he completely changes the topic. So there's another reference point of, if Fallon's not asking about it, I have to think that it's for a reason. I mean, you have to keep in mind, the Duffer Brothers had not said anything that denies it. Like, that should be case in point alone. And neither have any of the main characters. None of the main characters have just come out and said, there's no season 9, or there's no episode 9, which if there wasn't, they would have to be the world's biggest, what I would say to my nieces and nephews, jackpot, to not have done that by now. So there's another data point to think about. Vecna, in Eddie's number 10, in Eddie's D&D campaign, he essentially starts by saying Vecna lives. And they say, I thought Kaz already killed him off, which is the relationship to 11, which 11 technically is the one that, killed him off within this fake crap ending that we have. And he says, nope. He goes, so it was thought, my friends. And he says that he lost his left arm and his left eye, which essentially in the fake ending that we have, Vecna loses his left arm. And when Joyce chops off his head, it rolls to the ground on his left eye. So you can't see if his left eye is gone or not. So I'm like, there's too many illusions here. And Joyce tries to chop off his head 11 times before that head drops. So in Eddie's D&D campaign, essentially it was, we thought that 11 had already killed him off. So it was thought, but he lives again. And even his left arm and his left eye is gone. He's still alive. Number 14, Heroes, the song is playing in three different scenes in the series. It is playing at the ending for the series for episode 8 that we have. It's by David Bowie, the song Heroes. It is playing at Will's fake death in season 1 when he's not really dead. And it's playing at Hopper's fake death at the end of season 3. So in all three cases, or in 2 of the cases, we know confirmed that when Heroes was playing, it was when something's happening that's not actually real. And the third time that it happens is essentially here at the end of episode 8. Number 15. This is an interesting one. If you look at Will's shirt, it's very prominent. It stands out. He's got purple behind it, which essentially is the purple haze that Mike is talking about in the game. But the shirt that he's wearing, there's a lot of movie references that are had in Stranger Things theories. And one of the big ones for this last episode in specific was the Truman Show, because it ties in very much with there's a reality that's not actually real, that looks real, that has people that are playing characters, but it's someone's real life, which is Truman. So in the Truman Show, the ending, there's a lot of references to this, a couple of them that I'm going to get into. But in the final D&D campaign, Will is wearing a striped gray and white striped shirt. It stands out because he never wears anything like this before. And in the Truman Show, Truman's love interest, I can't remember her name, but she's watching him on the Truman Show. And in the final scene, when he walks out, those clouded scene, and he walks out the door, which is the same way that the episode 8 ends, is Mike walking up some staircases and walking out a door where the knob is on the opposite side, which we know that anytime there's an inconsistency, Holly said that it means that it's not real. Point being, when he does that, Will is wearing the same exact pattern and same exact color shirt as the love interest of Truman. So she was in the cast at one point, meaning she was in the show. But then she essentially leaves. It's who Truman essentially starts to fall in love with, which is not who they wanted him to fall in love with. So she essentially has to be pulled out of the show because she starts to tell him that it's not real. And so she continues to watch it because she actually loves him. And so in one of the last scenes, whenever he's leaving the show, essentially, he's figured out and he's leaving the show, she is wearing a gray and white striped shirt that looks exactly identical to Will's shirt. So there's another clue. Will is in season episode 5. He's behind glass that has the wormhole drawn on it when he's getting visions of Vecna, just like Truman, whenever he draws a little space suit and the head of a astronaut on the mirror within the Truman Show. So there's another Truman Show reference. Another one is Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade is playing in the movie theater at the Hawk in the epilogue. And The Last Crusade at the time was marketed as the last movie in the Indiana Jones series, whenever there were 2 more that were after that. The Under Armour. There was an Under Armour tag on Holly's arm whenever she was picked up by the mind flayer. And number one, that is not something anyone would miss. Why would she be wearing an Under Armour shirt? They were very thoughtful about everything that everyone was wearing. But there was an Under Armour tag that was on her sleeve and very obvious whenever she was cooped up in Dimension X, the mind flayer. So that was tagged online very prominently. And so the Duffer Brothers removed it and then reloaded the episode. I believe, here's an example of if there's another episode, how brilliant the Duffer Brothers were. The reason they included that is they wanted to show a mistake that people called out that they revised. So any mistakes that were true mistakes that they would revise, where you change the UA, the Under Armour, but you don't change the side of a doorknob or the color of the color of the meter over at the radio. So they were showing that if there was a mistake, that they would revise it, even though it wasn't a mistake, to show you that the rest of them aren't mistakes, they're actual clues. So there's another one. Number 19, Will is in front of a whole bunch of cigarettes in his last scene. He's at the bar at essentially what you think is a gay bar with someone that you think he might be romantically involved with. And in front of him, there's an ashtray of where there's several empty finished cigarette butts when he hated Joyce smoking. And even within season 5 itself, when Joyce was smoking, he comes out and he says, "Hey, I thought you quit." So why would he hate Joyce smoking all this time and then start taking up smoking himself? Number 21, everyone in Will's scene. So there was a viral theory that was talking about how everyone was standing at the graduation just like Henry, that they had their hands crossed. So Henry always had his hands crossed. Billy had his hands crossed whenever he was infected by the mind flayer. Will had his hands crossed when he was affected by the mind flayer. A lot of people called out that in graduation, that everyone in the crowd, whether they were graduating or not, had their hands crossed just like Henry. But what I think some people missed is in Will's coming out scene, everyone in that scene also had their hands crossed except for Mike. Every single one of them was standing just like Henry, except for Mike, which was extremely interesting. Number 21. Oh, the ring that Hopper proposed to with Joyce. For Joyce was the same exact identical ring that Jonathan was going to propose to with Nancy, but he left in the upside down. So Vecna would have known about that ring because it was in the upside down, but he would not have so essentially when he was, what we think is happening is that Mike, it's a trans in Mike's world. Mike is in a trance, so it's in his world, but some of the details are filled in by Henry, right? So in that instance, engagement ring that Henry would know is basically the one that Jonathan had for Nancy. It was the exact same ring that Hopper proposed to for Joyce. Number 22, this is one that I think a lot of people missed. When Holly saw Mr. What's-It, and she was awkwardly engaging with him whenever she was in True Hawkins, she waved at him with a really big, awkward wave. And then in the last clip, before they go through across through to the upside down and they get hit with the military, Derek looks at Mike and waves the exact same awkward way because it's signifying the exact same thing, that it is not real, that Mr. What's-It wasn't real and that the situation around them is not real at the time. Number 23, Derek doesn't cough out particles. He's the only kid that doesn't cough out particles. So it'd be weird for him to not cough out particles and be clearly infected by the mind flayer still, and then give that wave. Number 24, backwards books. Oh, okay. So all the books, basically the D&D books that the kids put up, there are 2 that are switched in the order that Finn put out online, which is the actor for Mike. So the ones that are the switch is essentially Will is switched for Dustin. And everyone knew there was a big theory that the letters spell out X-A-L-I-E, which means X a lie, which means Dimension X is a lie. One thing that I think people miss, that I only saw one person put out, was essentially if you put 11's book in there, then it would say X alive. Like Dimension X is alive and Vecna is also alive. So that was one that I wanted to call out. Why was Dr. Brenner's book in the Upside Down, which he created that book only after El created the gate, which means you never visibly saw him going to the upside down. And when he was quote unquote killed was in Hawkins, when he was at that lab in Arizona with 11. He was shot down by accidentally by the military. So there is no reason why his most prominent book, where he graphed all of his series, would essentially be in the upside down. Okay, number 29. There is in Max's, if you look in the credits, there's a whole bunch of essentially you have credits where each one of the characters is described. And for Max's, it says in penciled writing, JK-59. So what we think that means is just kidding. That's not really the end, but it's upside down. So it says JK-95. So we think that means it's just kidding, but it's upside down. So it means 5.9, meaning there's a 9th episode of season 5. So it's written in pencil, even though the rest is typed in pen. Number 30, there's a fake Thessal Hydra essentially in D&D, and there's a real Thessal Hydra. Let's start there. The real Thessal Hydra mixes up memories and makes characters forget with a mind song, which is essentially everything that's happening in this 8th episode, if we're correct. 31, the play with Henry. Well, here's a two-parter. So let's stay on 30. The play with Henry, essentially, when you originally see the play bill for Max, it says that the play is for Oklahoma. I've never seen this online. It says it's for Oklahoma. In the first shadow, which is the origin story of Henry, it says that it's for Dark Side of the Moon. That's the name of the play. And the contents of Dark Side of the Moon essentially is more in line with what we see in that episode 8 of when Max walks into the play. When you walk into the play, though, for in episode 8, when Max, finds her way around and she's like, Karen's over there, Ted's over there, hop smoking weed, da da da. And then it comes through the play, and that's how they use it to go into and to find the kids with Henry. All of those heads, there's a Thessal Hydra, which can recreate its heads. But there's also in D&D what's called a fake Thessal Hydra, which essentially tries to warp your memories and is not the real bad guy. Sound familiar? And it has essentially 8 heads, and all of them look like the mask in the movie Scream. So when you walk through to that play, there's like 8 people in there, and all of them have a mask that makes it look exactly like the fake Thessal Hydra monster. So if you Google fake Thessal Hydra, hit image and look at it, and it looks exactly of what Max 8 and 11 were in the middle of in that memory before they crash through and go through to Henry. So they essentially either the play is one or the other. In the bill it says Oklahoma, but in the first shadow it says Dark Side of the Moon. So it's like, which one of these was actually real? And even if it is Dark Side of the Moon, there's a fake Thessal Hydra. I'm not even kidding. It is outlandish that I'm like, the Duffer Brothers are genius. It literally looks like they're in the middle of one, which means that it's basically a fake monster that makes you forget everything. When they bust through and they go through, so they're like in the middle of a fake monster that makes them forget everything when they bust through and go to kill Henry. So absolutely bizarre. Number 40, where are we at? Okay. Okay. Stuff in the back of the horde. Okay. Lucas references to the monster. Yeah, I already told you about that one. When they go up into Dimension X, or the Abyss, as they call it within episode 8, Lucas mentions, why are there no monsters? So why would the Duffer Brothers take time to write that line and make them include it whenever it was a plot hole, essentially? They're writing in the plot hole to show you the plot hole so that people take notice of the plot hole, and then they forget where they found it. And so you would know that essentially that it wasn't real. Number 36, there is now WWE, the World Wrestling Association. They're essentially owned by Netflix. And at a WWE match the other day, there was 2 people with posters in the background that said, "Wake up, Mike." And I'm like, that is so detailed. Like, you would have to, like, I'm sure it was like cast or it was like crew members. They had a poster that said "Wake up, Mike," and was actually put on television. Number 37, they call in the Netflix ad. So on the 7th, which was very heavily alluded to. On the 7th is what is 7 essentially signifies, usually in the D&D or in the Stranger Things world, is loss, when people have lost. On January 7th, which everyone thought was when the extra episode was going to drop, what was dropped was basically an ad for Netflix of what's coming in 2026. What it started with was a girl who looks exactly like a younger Joyce Byers. She's in red and blue and yellow, just like in the Stranger Things characters. She puts in her headphones, and in the background, there is ads for Stranger Things. It is all Stranger Things characters. And essentially, one of the first lines that they come up with is they said, she says in the background, some would call it a coincidence, which sound familiar. Lucas said, I don't believe in coincidences anymore. There's a lot of different pieces to that ad. I'm not going to go into most of them because most of them are online, but that was one that I thought was really interesting. Was it said you could call it, some could call it a coincidence, when Lucas literally said there are no coincidences anymore and broke the fourth wall whenever he was saying it. He was like, hey, everyone, there are no coincidences. And she's saying that exact line. Everyone thought it was going to be the Stranger Things release, but it wasn't. But it was just basically a big episode of Clues. It was very Stranger Things influenced. It had Millie Bobby Brown saying you're going to question everything. And at the front of that ad, it said something to the degree of 2026 is going to deceive you. You will be deceived, and you're going to like it. And I'm like, yeah, it's because this is how we're going to start the year, is freaking this game of Clue that they're going to blow up tonight. Okay, 39. Mike and Nancy didn't want to turn into their parents. Max in season 2 said she didn't want to turn into Billy. Mike and Nancy at the end of season in episode 8 turned exactly into their parents. They have the same haircuts even. Max didn't want to turn into Billy. And so when she was told the ending, and I thought it was really out of place, and now I understand it, she didn't want to turn into Billy. When she finds out it was a fake ending, she gets up and she starts hitting crap around. She's like, this is the ending. And I think it was an illusion of she's turning into the exact thing that she said she didn't want to. Number 40 on the Netflix site or on their Instagram, essentially they would post a card after every single episode, like, episode 1, The Crawl, after it was aired. After episode 8 aired, they posted the episode 8 card and then a blank card. I'm like, y'all, I understand that I sound crazy. I understand that. Now I understand what Joyce was talking about. I'm like, I understand that I sound crazy. There's too many of these. There's too many of these for this to be a mistake. Like, it can't be this volume of mistakes. So they posted a blank slate, which I think is, that there is another episode that we're coming. Whenever number 41, whenever Will saw through the Demogorgons and he saw all the characters, and this is essentially right after we think that Mike went into a trance. Robin and Lucas, like basically the two of the three people that he saved from the Demogorgon, then he snapped all their limbs when he figured out they had powers. Their eyes were fine. Mike's eyes were completely in black. So I think it's a sign that he was already in a trance. Number 42, at the end, they're basically, whenever Mike's campaign, they're sent to a town. And that town basically is a town where, quote unquote, in D&D terms, everyone conforms and pretends to be happy. That is the nightmare. That's the town that they were sent to. Number 43, Mike said that he's, whenever he's like thinking in the first episode, he's sitting next to Nancy and he kind of goes into a trance, and Nancy's like, what's your problem? And he said, I'm thinking about what Lucas said, when Lucas had just said there are no coincidences. So he's starting to put things together. Number 44, essentially what characters needed before Vecna it came after them, was they needed to experience trauma, and they needed to be tired. So Mike, in the first episode, he is the only one at the breakfast table that's drinking coffee. Everyone else is drinking juice. And when he gets to the hospital, he's drinking coffee too, because he's essentially really tired. And then they put him through some trauma. Like, Demogorgons basically don't kill anyone, but the Demogorgons almost kill his mom, his father, and take his sister to make him experience trauma so that Vecna could infect him. Number 45, there's no water in the Upside Down, and 11 had a tank. We already did that one. 46, in the season 5 poster that was released after episode 8. That's very key. After episode 8, they put a season 5 poster, and Mike was attached to Vecna. I'm like, guys, this is coming. I'm telling you, I believe. You have to believe, if you're watching this, that this is coming. To the, my mom and whoever else is watching this. Number 47, the actor for Freddy Krueger is played, the same actor is Victor Creel, essentially, which Freddy Krueger is the series that we think that they're going to mirror the documentary after. Max playing Big Doug, we already did that. Number 49, here's one I haven't seen online. Dustin is a valedictorian at graduation. Riddle me this, Batman. Dustin got a D and had Susie correct his D. How could he be the valedictorian? He was trying to get away from a D. So I understand that he's smart and I understand the misunderstanding, but there's no way he would have been the valedictorian if he was trying to combat basically, a D. Number 51. Oh, we already said that one. Oh, no, 52, what Steve says. Steve says in the epilogue, he says to all, when they're on the rooftop with all the others, he's like, don't you miss this? Don't you miss being around here? And he gives 4 locations. He says the forest, and then the second location he gives is basically the location where they found Will's body in the water, in the ravine. Why would he say that you miss the forest? The only time we see people in the forest is when they're in the nightmare scenes. Basically, they're about to get attacked by a Demogorgon or they're running from one. And why would they miss, out of all things, the place where Will was captured? So that's number 52. 53, there are product placements. A lot people commented on this, of like, they were talking about bugles, and then they had talked about beef jerky, and then they had talked about boppers. It's because it's a callback to the Truman Show. Of any single time that that's one of the final scenes that he breaks, is when his wife stops to be like, with Ovaltine milk, you have denser bones. And he's like, who are you talking to? And so that all those product placements were a shout out to the Truman Show, because it's not actually real in the end. 54. The heart that's basically in the middle of the Mind Flayer particle. I believe that we're in Mike's body at this point. And so the heart is actually Mike's heart, which he also is known in season 4 as the heart of the campaign. And the heart, like basically of the Warriors, is because the entire world that we're in right now and operating in is Mike's actual body and Mike's actual world. Okay, number 55. Someone calls, Dustin calls the principal a square. Which the only time you would have done that is in the 60s, when basically Henry was at graduation. Number 56, NYU, is mentioned that Jonathan was at NYU now. Here's another big one. So it is revealed in season 1 that Jonathan wanted to go to NYU. Mike knew that. Joyce knew that. Joyce's husband, Lonnie, didn't know that. But everyone knew that Jonathan wanted to go to NYU. Then it was Jonathan's going to go to Emerson with Nancy. Then it's a big point in basically this contention point between the two of them, that he's like, I don't want to go to Emerson because I want to stay put and I want to stay near Will. So he doesn't go to Emerson. So you're telling me that within 18 months, he makes a decision not only to not go to Emerson to stay near Will, but to go to college somewhere else and to go to NYU? That makes no freaking sense. So unless, again, we're in like Mike's ideal world, because Mike doesn't know that Jonathan isn't going to go to Emerson. He doesn't know that essentially Jonathan wants to stay near home. He isn't revealed that whenever, because Mike's not in the scene. So that's another one that doesn't make sense. Number 57, Mike's biggest fear is that 11 will be taken away from him, which is exactly what happens in that dream. So what Beckman does is he mirrors back the dreams of what people are scared of to people. So he mirrors back to Hopper that 11's going to go. He mirrors back to, let's pick another one, Nancy, that Barb's death is her fault. He mirrors back to Chrissy that she's too fat. He mirrors back to Fred that basically that car wreck was his fault. So essentially he's mirroring back to Mike in that final moments that 11 dies and is taken away from him. That's what he's mirroring back to him because it's Mike's dream and it's not real. Number 58, sorry, number 58, at the graduation, there is a guy on the left-hand side that it's so obvious what they're doing here now that I take a look at it, but he has a shirt on and he is videotaping it, and it says on his shirt Duffers because he's representing that he's the Duffer brothers, and who he's videotaping is us. That he's videotaping our reaction to what happens in episode 8. If